Chapter 510. The Tianfeng region belonged to the Quicksand Prefecture. It was very far from the Tongtian mountain and was 3 prefectures away. The Tianfeng region was a very prosperous region. It was 10 times more prosperous than the Tianhe region, and its area was also a few times bigger than the Tianhe region. This was because in the north of the Tianfeng region, there was a dangerous place in the central sword region, the Wind and Fire Desert. The Wind and Fire Desert was a place where many swordsmen went to train, and the Tianfeng region was a place they had to pass through. There were a lot of people coming and going, which led to the development of the Tianfeng region. At this time, the sky had just brightened, and most of the shops in the Tianfeng region were not open yet. There was a small shop with a big flag with the word Chu written in red on it. There was a line of people waiting for the shop to open like a long snake. Although there were a lot of people in the Tianfeng region, it was rare to see people waiting in line. This attracted a lot of people's attention. "Go and ask what is going on." A young man in white said. "Yes, young master." A middle-aged man dressed like a guard walked towards the line of people and grabbed one of them by the collar. He asked fiercely, "Kid, what is going on here? Why are there so many people waiting in line?" The person who was grabbed was a young man who was only at the Qi High realm. He was about to get angry, but when he saw the ferocious face of the guard and the frightening Qi he was releasing, he immediately put on a smile and explained, "We are all waiting to buy swords made by Master Chu." "Swords made by Master Chu? Is this Master Chu a master swordsmith?" The middle-aged guard's ferocious face showed some curiosity. "I don't know if Master Chu is a master swordsmith or not, but I know that the swords made by Master Chu are of a higher quality, sharper, and more powerful than normal swords." The young man continued to explain, "Also, the price is not expensive. It is about the same as normal swords, so many people want to buy Master Chu swords. But Master Chu only makes 100 swords a day. Once they are sold out, we have to wait for the next day. So we are here early to wait. Since he's called a master, he's most likely not a grandmaster swordsmith." After the middle-aged sword guard understood the situation, he shook his head in disdain and let go of the young man's collar. Although he was only a sword guard, the power he belonged to was not simple. There were many master swordsmiths and even grandmaster swordsmiths. It was not difficult for them to forge swords that were better than ordinary swords. "Young master, this place is—" The middle-aged sword guard returned to the side of the white-clothed youth and explained the situation to him. However, he didn't finish a sentence because he knew his young master's temperament very well. He didn't like people gossiping and making wild guesses. "Oh." The eyes of the young man in white brightened, revealing a hint of curiosity. He ordered, "You stay here and buy a sword. Bring it back to the Bao Sword Tower for me to take a look." After giving his instructions, the young man in white immediately left with the other 2 people. "Yes." Although the middle-aged sword guard did not agree, he did not dare to show the slightest dissatisfaction. However, he who thought that his status was higher than others directly walked to the front and pushed the swordsman who was in the first place down. "Hey, what are you doing? Don't you know how to line up?" The person who was squeezed out was naturally very dissatisfied and immediately groaned and shouted, "Humph." The middle-aged sword guard turned around and shouted with a ferocious look, "Line up? How dare you ask me to line up? Do you want to die?" This threat made the swordsman who was talking unconsciously take 2 steps back, feeling that he had shown weakness. His face immediately turned red, and with the fact that there were other people here, his courage was boosted. "That's right, line up. Every one of us who came here has to consciously line up. You came later than us, but you want to take the first place? This is absolutely unacceptable. Line up, you have to line up. Line up, line up. If you don't want to line up, then get lost." This middle-aged sword guard had the cultivation of the origin realm de Shang, and his strength was tyrannical. Right now, facing the angry accusations of dozens of people, he was not the least bit afraid. Instead, his face turned gloomy, and his eyes flashed with a dangerous light. He shouted, "Whoever dares to shout again, I will kill them." A frightening evil chi burst out from his body like a storm, sweeping across dozens of people, making them feel cold all over. Waves of coldness rushed from the end of their spines to their heads, and they were drenched in cold sweat. After being hit by this powerful and frightening evil chi, these people did not dare to say anything, and could only obediently line up at the back. Right at this moment, the door of the small shop opened, and a young man in his 20s glanced at the people waiting outside with a calm expression. A year ago, he was taken in as a waiter by Master Chu. When he first saw this scene, he was very shocked, but now he was used to it. If he did not see this kind of scene when he opened the shop one day, he would be surprised. "Kid, pick a good royal sword for me right now." The middle-aged sword guard shouted arrogantly, "Sorry, sir, this shop does not sell royal swords." The young man was startled at first, but then he replied in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. "The swords sold in this shop are mainly the top upper swords and the top supreme swords. Without a royal grade sword, it is indeed an insignificant store." The middle-aged sword guard sneered. He had already guessed that this shop did not have any royal swords. The reason why he said that was completely intentional, because that was his personality. "Give me one of the top supreme swords you guys call here." The waiter's face immediately showed a hint of anger. He respected Master Chu a lot. The reason why he was able to reach the peak of the Chi-Hai realm was all because of Master Chu's guidance. He also had a top-quality sword that was given to him by Master Chu. It was much sharper than other top-quality swords, and it could easily cut through normal top-quality swords like cutting vegetables. The swords sold in the shop were all personally forged by Master Chu. However, he was very clear that the top swords here couldn't be compared to the one that Master Chu had gifted him. It could be said that the top swords here were only made by Master Chu for practice. Even if they were made for practice, they were not inferior to the top swords in the outside world. This made him respect Master Chu even more, and he would not allow anyone to question or mock him. "The swords in this shop are not sold to people who are blind," the waiter said angrily. "What did you say? How dare you say that I am blind? Do you want to die?" The middle-aged sword guard stared at the waiter fiercely. His murderous aura swept out like a tidal wave. The waiter could not withstand it and was sent flying backwards. Blood spurted out of his mouth as he landed heavily on the ground. The people behind him saw this and were shocked. Who would dare to fight here? The middle-aged sword guard acted as if he had just done something insignificant. He coldly glanced at the waiter who was lying on the ground and spurting out blood. He raised his hand and grabbed in the air. A top supreme sword flew up and was about to land in his hand. Suddenly, the middle-aged sword guard felt that the light in front of him dimmed and then returned to normal. It seemed like an illusion, but he did not know when, but a figure appeared beside the waiter who was lying on the ground and reached out his hand to grab the top supreme swords. "Master Chu. Master Chu has come out." "Get lost." A low shout came out like thunder, and the middle-aged sword guard's face changed. He looked over with a gloomy face. He saw that the light around the figure had dimmed, as if it was being sucked in. With his eyesight, he could not see clearly at a distance of a few meters, but he could still see that it was a young man around 25 or 26 years old, wearing a white robe. "Master Chu? He is so young." But with just one shout, I could feel the mental pressure. The middle-aged sword guard was shocked. He felt that he could not see through this young man. He did not seem to be at the Chi-Hai realm, nor the origin realm. Instead, he seemed to be at the 9th transformation realm. But on second thought, how could a 9th revolution realm swordsman appear so brazenly in the outside world and even open a small shop? According to what he knew, which 9th revolution realm swordsmen did not find a secret place to enter seclusion until they broke through or could not break through anymore. Although he knew his place, the young man in front of him was too mysterious. He could not see through him. His face kept changing, and he did not dare to make a move. He turned around and was about to leave. "Stop!" A cold shout came again. "You injured my waiter. Without enough compensation. Do you still think you can leave safely?" This voice was extremely sharp and overbearing. A terrifying mental pressure came, and waves of impact made the middle-aged sword guard feel even more pressured. Although he wanted to pull out his sword, he suppressed this impulse. Otherwise, once a fight broke out, it might cause a huge impact and anger the young master. At that time, the loss would outweigh the gain. Understanding this point, the middle-aged sword guard took out a jade bottle from his spatial bracelet and threw it out. "There are 10 great revitalizing pellets in here. It should be enough compensation. Also, give me a top-quality sword." The great revitalizing pellet was famous. It was a very precious healing pellet. It had an outstanding effect on both internal and external injuries. It was worth a lot. 10 great revitalizing pellets were worth more than a top-quality sword. Master Chu did not stop him from taking away a top-quality sword. 10 great revitalizing pellets were indeed enough. Adding on some other factors, it would be best if he did not make a move to avoid unnecessary trouble. He took out a great revitalizing pellet and gave it to the waiter. After 15 minutes, the waiter's face returned to normal. Although his injuries were not completely healed, they were no longer a problem. "Thank you, master." The waiter quickly bowed. "Let's start the sale." Grandmaster Chu nodded and left behind a sentence. In the next breath, his silhouette flickered and disappeared. It was difficult for people to detect how he left. In fact, no one could clearly see Grandmaster Chu's face. They could only vaguely see his face. The waiter wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. He was excited. He slammed the table and shouted, "Now, we will start the sale of the top-quality sword made by Master Chu." As soon as he finished speaking, those people immediately rushed up. However, they were not in a mess. They all lined up according to the previous line. They all knew that they did not have the ability to cause trouble here. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chijian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 511. The Chuji store was divided into 3 sections. One was the store, one was the resting area, and the last one was the sword forging area. At this moment, Master Chu was in the 3rd section. He was holding a black iron hammer that weighed 100 pounds. He was slowly hammering on the red-hot iron, gradually forming the shape of a sword. If there was a grandmaster swordsmith present and carefully observed, he would discover that every time Grandmaster Chu's hammer landed on the sword embryo, there would be a strange vibration power. The moment the black iron hammer touched the sword embryo, the vibration power would instantly vibrate tens of thousands of times, continuously tempering the sword embryo and making it more condensed bit by bit. At the same time, when the vibration force was applied to the sword, the strong vibration force would remove the impurities on the sword and improve the quality of the sword. Sky Shaking Yuan Sword Forging Art. The essence of this sword forging art was vibration and fusion. This person was Chu Mu, who had disappeared for a year. A year ago, Chu Mu had condensed the sword's soul prototype with the help of the Azura sword of Gojoseon. Then he broke through the Chi-Hai realm and reached the first revolution of the 9th revolution realm. At the same time, Chu Mu's lacerating mentality and illusionary mentality also broke through, becoming the lacerating profound and the illusionary profound. Although the Sky Baron sword Chi was sealed in his body and could not be used at will, Chu Mu's strength had increased a lot. With the 30% sword intent from the sword's soul prototype and the power of the profound, coupled with his body that was not inferior to an astral realm swordsman, it was enough to kill a normal astral realm swordsman. Because he could not use the sword Chi, Chu Mu left the cave on foot. He walked as if he was flying. In a few days, he had entered the Tianfeng County. Finally, he bought a small store that could not operate anymore and opened a sword forging shop. He began to study the Sky Shaking Yuan sword forging art. Of course, Chu Mu didn't give up on his cultivation while studying the Sky Quake Fusion sword forging technique. Chu Mu began to cultivate the 9 Revolutions body tempering chapter of the Heavenly Desolate Sword Codex. He tempered the first level of the Heavenly Desolate sword body, causing the Heavenly Desolate sword body to improve bit by bit. Because of his deep accumulation, Chu Mu cultivated the 9 Revolutions body tempering very quickly. Not long after, he broke through to the 2nd revolution of the 9 Revolutions realm, causing the strength of his body to increase again. Today, after a year, Chu Mu had reached the 7th turn of the 9 turns refining technique, which was the 7th turn of the 9 turns realm. The strength of the Tianhuang sword body was 7 times stronger than before. It was more than 7 times stronger than an ordinary origin realm swordsman. It was extremely terrifying. Combined with sword intent and ultimacy, it would not be too difficult for him to kill an ordinary origin realm swordsman. Speaking of Chu Mu's improvement in the past year, other than reaching the 7th turn of the 9 turns realm, Chu Mu had also increased his comprehension of the lacerating ultimacy and illusory ultimacy to 20%, which was the entry level. Once he reached 40%, he would have reached the initial level. At that time, his power would increase greatly. However, ultimacy was much more powerful than mental state. It was at least 10 times more difficult to comprehend. Even with Chu Mu's increased comprehension due to his breakthrough and the strength of his soul, he had only managed to increase his comprehension of these 2 ultimacies to 20% in the past year. It should be known that many swordsmen would not be able to reach 20% of their ultimacy after breaking through to the origin realm. The difference between their comprehension and Chu Mu's was like heaven and earth. With the improvement of his ultimacy, his sword intent would naturally not fall behind. A year ago, Chu Mu's sword intent was only at 30%. Now a year later, Chu Mu's sword intent had reached 40%, and the embryonic form of the sword soul in the center of his spiritual world had become more solid. Because of the embryonic form of the sword soul, Chu Mu's 40% sword intent could not unleash the power of an ordinary swordsman's 50% sword intent. With the addition of the 20% of the lacerating ultimacy, the power was unparalleled and terrifying. Many Origin Realm swordsmen's sword intent had been stuck below 40%, and many Origin Realm swordsmen's sword intent had been stuck below 50%. People like Chu Mu, who had reached this level of comprehension when he was still in the 9 turns realm, were too few. Even geniuses like Zhu Wudao and Yan Jiuyou might not be able to reach this level. Of course, even if their comprehension was not as good as Chu Mu's, they still had powerful sects to rely on, providing them with all kinds of resources and conveniences. This allowed them to improve at an extremely fast speed, surpassing ordinary swordsmen by countless times. The improvement of his body, sword intent, and ultimacy was indeed gratifying. However, there was another improvement that made Chu Mu extremely happy. It was the breakthrough of his vibration force. The Zhentian school's Zhentian energy had 5 levels: basic vibration force, stone shaking force, mountain shaking force, earth shaking force, and Zhentian energy. 3 months ago, Chu Mu had broken through the stone shaking force with the help of the sky shaking energy fusion sword forging technique. He had successfully reached the 3rd level, mountain shaking force. It was not an exaggeration to say that the stone shaking force could shatter rocks. As for mountain shaking force, Chu Mu did not know if it had the power to shatter mountains. Perhaps it did not, but since it was called mountain shaking force, it could at least shatter some small hills. In theory, the power of mountain shaking force was on the same level as that of ultimacy. However, the way it was displayed was different. There was a huge difference. They belonged to completely different systems. There was no comparison between the two. Chu Mu had also thought that there were 5 levels of Zhentian energy. If the level of mountain shaking force was equivalent to ultimacy, then what about earth shaking force? What level of power was it equivalent to? What was above ultimacy? Chu-Mu did not know. Moreover, after earth-shaking force, there was Zhen-Tian energy, which was more advanced and more terrifying. What made Chu-Mu feel regretful was that the air-penetrating force was still at the second level, which was the level of stone-penetrating force. He had not broken through yet. The heaven-shaking energy was, after all, the essence of the heaven-shaking flow. Although it had already been lost, it could still be seen from the words in a few damaged ancient texts. Adding on the fact that his realm was constantly increasing and he had used it many times, Chu-Mu had evidence to back it up. Bit by bit, he finally deduced the third level of the mountain-shaking energy and broke through. As for the air-penetrating force, it could be said that Chu-Mu had deduced it from the beginning. Even the stone-penetrating force was a technique that he had deduced with reference to stone-shaking force. If he wanted to deduce the next level of mountain-penetrating force, it would be even more difficult and would take a longer time. Even if he was anxious, he couldn't rush it. Chu-Mu could only comprehend a little bit every day. His schedule was packed to the brim, and he didn't have any time to sleep. His resting room was only used to cultivate the 9-revolution body tempering technique. As for the 6 types of concepts that he had comprehended in the Eastern Saint Sub-Palace, they had also improved because he had broken through to the 9th transformation realm. 4 of them had improved to 90%. As long as Chu-Mu was willing to spend some time, he would definitely be able to improve them to perfection and then break through to the profoundness. However, that would definitely distract Chu-Mu and take up a lot of his time. Perhaps in the future, Chu-Mu would do that, but right now he did not have such thoughts. However, because he had spent a lot of time beside the furnace to forge the sword, Chu-Mu had used the fire concept to help the fire, causing the temperature of the fire to be higher and more vigorous. It was also easier to control. Therefore, even if he did not deliberately comprehend it, he had already broken through to the profoundness of fire and reached 10%. In addition, there was also the water concept. Because he needed to temper the water when forging the sword, he could use the water concept to control the water and achieve a better tempering effect. Therefore, he did not deliberately comprehend the water concept and reached 10% of the profoundness of water, which was on par with the profoundness of fire. Lastly, there was the advancement of the Skyquake sword forging art. This sword forging art was not complete. It only had the part to forge royal-grade swords. The rest should be in the O clan of the central sword domain. And now, after a year, Chu-Mu had studied the Skyquake sword forging art to the Grandmaster level. Moreover, he had also reached the pinnacle of the Grandmaster level. He was only one step away from becoming a Grandmaster blacksmith who could forge royal-grade swords. However, this step was like a heavenly moat that obstructed him. Even after a month, he was still unable to break through. The swords created by Chu-Mu, who was a sword master, couldn't be compared to the normal swords circulating in the outside world. This was because the heavenly shaking fusion sword forging technique was a very profound sword forging technique, and there was a clear difference between it and normal sword forging techniques. Moreover, Chu-Mu's Zhen-Tian energy had reached the 3rd level, the mountain quaking energy. When used on the Skyquake sword forging art, the improvement was even more obvious. If he put his heart into it, he could forge a top-quality sword that was comparable to ordinary royal-grade swords in terms of sharpness and hardness. It might even frighten people to death. Even if many Grandmaster blacksmiths put their heart into forging top-quality swords, they would not be able to compare with Chu-Mu's. Of course, Chu-Mu did not take out this kind of top-quality sword to sell. It was too shocking and could be considered his proudest work. He would not take it out easily. The black iron hammer slowly hammered on the sword embryo. The sword embryo had now taken the shape of a sword. After hammering it a few more times, Chu-Mu nodded in satisfaction and began to temper the sword. Sizzling sounds were heard, and countless white gas spiraled up. Under the control of the profoundness of water, it did not dissipate. Instead, it continuously condensed in the surroundings and interacted with the water below to temper the sword. After a while, the tempering was completed. Chu Mu pulled out the sword from the water. The sword was 1 meter long, but only as wide as a finger. Compared to ordinary swords, it was obviously much narrower. The tip of the sword was incomparably sharp. It did not move, but it seemed to have the sharpness to pierce through the void. This was obviously a strange sword, and its main power was reflected in the thrust. Chu Mu waved his hand and stabbed a few more times. The speed of each stab was as fast as lightning, and the sound was extremely soft. The sword light was shockingly condensed, as if it had pierced a few holes in the void in front of it. That's it for today. Chu Mu muttered to himself. He put this top-quality sword into the space bracelet and turned around to walk out of the sword-forging room. He entered the lounge and sat cross-legged to comprehend the sword intent. Outside, the 100 swords were sold out every day. Chu Mu gave all the spirit stones he obtained to the shop assistant to buy the materials he needed to forge the swords. This cycle repeated itself as he continued to forge swords and improve himself. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 512. What a good sword. Even the 2 masters in the Bao sword tower would not be able to forge such a high-quality sword. In a room, the young man in white pulled out the sword. His eyes sparkled as if they were flowing. He lightly tapped the body of the sword, and the melodious sound continued to be heard, as if it came from the heavens. Just by looking at its appearance, this high-quality sword was indeed extraordinary. The eyes of the 2 middle-aged sword guards and the maid beside him lit up. Although they did not know much about swords, ever since they stepped onto the path of a sword artist, they had seen a lot of swords, so they had a good eye for swords. You said that this Master Chu looks like he is in his 20s. The young man in white turned around and asked one of the middle-aged sword guards, "Young master, that is indeed the case. That Master Chu does not look more than 30 years old, and the feeling he gives me is very strange. It is as if he does not have any cultivation." The middle-aged sword guard thought for a while and replied, "To be able to forge a high-quality sword, he must at least be in the Chi-Hai realm. But I cannot feel any sword chi from him. There are only 3 possibilities. The first is that his cultivation is higher than mine. The second is that he has some kind of treasure that can cover his body's chi. The last is that he is in the 9th transformation realm. Go and invite this Master Chu here. Tell him that I am the one who invited him to become a sword forger in the Bao Sword Tower. His position is equivalent to a master." The young man in white put the sword back into the scabbard and placed it on the table beside him. Suddenly his eyes flashed. "If he is not willing, you know how to deal with him." "Yes, young master." The middle-aged sword guard was happy. Originally, he was a little frustrated at the Chu restaurant, but now, with the young master's order, he could do whatever he wanted. If that young master Chu dared to resist, he could teach him a lesson. But what he did not expect was that he could not find Chu Mu at all. Once again, he finished comprehending the sword intent. Although there was no improvement, each comprehension was a kind of accumulation, from quantitative change to qualitative change. As for cultivating the 9 revolutions body tempering technique, it didn't need to be done every day. This was because 1 tempering session usually took a day. After the tempering session was completed, one could only wait for the next tempering session. According to the situation of a year, it would usually take more than a month. This time interval was extremely short for other 9th Revolution Realm swordsmen because most 9th Revolution Realm swordsmen would have to wait at least a year for the second tempering after the first tempering. Although each tempering would increase the strength of his body and the purity of his sword chi, it was also a burden on his body. This kind of burden could not be removed by human means. It could only be allowed to recover on its own. Some people recovered slowly, while others recovered quickly. The speed of recovery was not only related to one's physique, but also the degree of accumulation. In another half a month, I will be able to undergo the 8th tempering session and enter the 8th revolution, the origin realm. It won't be long. Chu Mu sighed softly and said, in his spiritual world, the meteor sword essence from the great Kuin sword mansion master still existed. It had never been used. The aura it emitted was almost enough to cause Chu Mu's sword soul prototype to collapse. After comprehending the sword intent, Chu Mu began to study the sky-shaking Yuan fusion sword forging technique. The sky-shaking Yuan fusion sword forging technique. Strictly speaking, it can be divided into two parts, sky-shaking and Yuan fusion. The part one obtained is incomplete. Only the sky-shaking part was not mentioned in Yuan fusion. According to what I have comprehended in the past year, the so-called Yuan fusion is most likely to inject one's sword chi into the sword embryo when hammering it. It strengthens the sword embryo from the inside out, making it more adaptable and conductive to sword chi. Chu Mu frowned slightly. Unfortunately, I have already completely grasped the sky-shaking part, but I'm still missing the Yuan fusion part. Chu Mu simply sorted out the incomplete sky-shaking Yuan fusion sword forging technique from the beginning. Then he combined it with his sword forging experience in the past year and carefully pondered over it. The essence of the sky-shaking part of the sky-shaking Yuan fusion sword forging technique was vibration. Chu Mu's vibration power had already reached the 3rd level, the mountain quaking energy. Compared to the real O clan, he was much better in this aspect, at least several times better. This was also why Chu Mu only grasped the sky-shaking part. Under the situation where he lacked the essence of Yuan fusion, he was still able to forge a top-notch supreme grade sword. However, it was still not enough. For Chu Mu, even forging the most ordinary royal grade sword would be very difficult, let alone forging a top-notch royal grade sword like the Sky Desolate sword. Chu Mu understood that he had to solve the Yuan fusion part. He had a premonition that once he solved this part, he might be able to break through the master swordsmith level and become a grandmaster swordsmith. Then he would be able to forge a genuine royal grade sword. However, even if I obtain the Yuan fusion method now, I won't be able to successfully cultivate it because I can't use sword chi right now. As he thought about it, Chu Mu's body suddenly shook. His eyes emitted a terrifying light. I've been thinking too much. He clapped his hands and suddenly stood up. He pushed open the door of the lounge and strode towards the sword forging room. I have 2 special powers, the Zhentian energy and the void penetrating energy. The Zhentian energy is vibration, and the void penetrating energy is penetration. Since I don't have the Yuan fusion method, I might as well change my way of thinking and replace it with the void penetrating energy. Chu Mu said excitedly as he pushed open the door of the sword forging room. A scorching aura assaulted his face. This was a completely new attempt. If he succeeded, it would mean that Chu Mu had walked his own path in the O family's Skyquake, Yuan fusion, sword forging technique. Using the profound meaning of fire, the temperature of the flames in the furnace continued to rise to a terrifying degree. The temperature in the sword forging room was already high enough to roast an ordinary person to the point of suffocation. Chu Mu had already taken off his robe and put it away. His upper body was bare, and he was only wearing a pair of shorts. In a short while, the soldering iron had turned red from the heat. This kind of metal was specially used to forge top-grade swords. After all, the higher the quality of the sword, the higher the hardness and toughness. Naturally, the requirements for the materials were also higher. Fortunately, there were many top-grade swords in a place like the central main sword domain. Therefore, the materials used to forge top-grade swords were also very common. There were often shops that specialized in refining metals that sold them. There were even metals used to forge royal-grade swords. Of course, the price was much higher. Chu Mu pulled out the red-hot soldering iron from the raging flames and grabbed the 50-kilogram black iron hammer. He began to try to use the vibration and penetrating energy on the soldering iron at the same time. This was undoubtedly a very difficult technique. The vibration and penetrating energy were two completely different kinds of energy. Chu Mu had never used these two kinds of energy at the same time. Instead, he separated them and created the two ultimate sword skills, iron slash and point kill. Now, because he wanted to make a breakthrough in the sword forging technique, he suddenly had the idea to use these two different kinds of energy at the same time. The first attempt ended in failure. Chu Mu was not discouraged. He knew that this was not an easy task, especially when the two kinds of energy, mountain-quaking energy and rock-penetrating energy, were not equal. It was even more difficult. However, since he had found the direction, he would persevere until he succeeded. On the first day, the soldering iron was hammered out of shape by Chu Mu. He did not succeed in using the mountain-quaking energy and rock-penetrating energy at the same time. On the second day, he told the shop assistant that once the swords in the shop were sold out, he would temporarily close the shop and would inform him when he would reopen. Chu Mu continued to forge and tried to use the two kinds of energy at the same time. He still failed. The third day, the fourth day, the fifth day, Chu Mu failed day after day, but he persevered day after day. His spirit was unprecedentedly focused, as if he had gone mad. He did not have any time to rest at all. He stayed in the sword forging room 24 hours a day. On the sixth day, Chu Mu's eyes were bloodshot, but he was still tirelessly waving the black iron hammer. When he hammered down, Chu Mu was suddenly stunned. This was because he felt that the iron felt under the soldering iron was bombarded by a force, and it instantly shook. This feeling was much stronger and more condensed than the rock-penetrating energy. The rock-penetrating energy has also broken through. Chu Mu did not react for a moment. He did not expect that after working hard for 6 days, the Zhantian energy and space-penetrating energy were not used together. Instead, the rock-penetrating energy had broken through. This should be equivalent to the level of mountain-quaking energy. Let's name it mountain-quaking energy, Chu Mu said, temporarily giving up on trying to use the two forces at the same time. Chu Mu tested the power of the mountain-quaking energy. The rock-penetrating energy could only penetrate things that were not very dense, whether it was solid, liquid, or gas. In terms of destructive power, it was far inferior to the rock-quaking energy. It was only superior in terms of strangeness and difficulty to guard against. Naturally, the power of the mountain-quaking energy could not be compared to the mountain-quaking energy. After all, the role of the mountain-quaking energy was purely to destroy, while the role of the mountain-quaking energy was to penetrate. After trying, Chu Mu found that the mountain-quaking energy could penetrate steel and not ordinary steel. It could easily penetrate the metal used to forge top-grade swords. This was something that the previous rock-penetrating energy could not do. As for the destructive power of the mountain-quaking energy, it was probably equivalent to the rock-quaking energy. Next, Chu Mu still tried to combine the mountain-quaking energy and the mountain-quaking energy together, but he could not do it. He also understood the reason. It was because these two forces were very unique. The use of each force required his full concentration, and the burden on his body was also very obvious. With his current physical strength and mental strength, it was not enough to support the fusion of these two forces. The burden was too great. If he forced the fusion, his body would collapse, and even his mental world would be severely damaged. Since he understood this, Chu Mu no longer forced the fusion of the two forces. Instead, he took a step back and used the mountain-quaking energy to hit the soldering iron first. The moment the mountain-quaking energy took effect, he used the mountain-quaking energy to penetrate the soldering iron, working from the inside and the outside. In just one day, Chu Mu succeeded. The moment he succeeded, he suddenly had a feeling that perhaps he could start forging royal-grade swords. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 5:13. The four walls of the huge room were made of thick and heavy steel, and there were all kinds of seals. These seals could strengthen the steel walls several times to prevent accidents from happening. Inside the huge furnace, there was a terrifying flame burning, as if there was an ancient demon hiding inside. The light emitted by the flame lit up the whole room. The light was cyan, which was very strange. This flame was not an ordinary flame, but a special flame with a temperature that reached a certain limit. It was called the cyan steel flame. The cyan steel flame was enough to melt ordinary metals in an instant. Even the metal of a top-grade sword would be melted in a short period of time. Chu Mu stood beside the furnace and used an iron clamp to place a soldering iron into the cyan steel flame. This soldering iron was a synthetic metal used to forge king-grade swords. Before forging the Desolate Sky Sword, Chu Mu wanted to forge other king-grade swords as practice. However, the flame in his small shop was not enough to melt the synthetic metal used to forge king-grade swords. This was the biggest place to buy and sell swords in the Tianfeng province, one of the Sword Treasure House's sword forges. Only a place like the Sword Treasure House could have a sword forges that could forge king-grade swords. This was because the cyan steel flame was more powerful than ordinary flames. Renting a sword forges like this for a day would cost 10,000 upper-grade spirit stones, which was very expensive. Moreover, the spirit stones needed to support the cyan steel flame were also provided by him. As expected of the cyan steel flame, it did not take long for the soldering iron to turn red, and he began to forge. In the entire sword forges, there was only Chu Mu, so he did not have to worry about being spied on. Chu Mu forged to his heart's content. He alternated between using the mountain-shaking energy and the mountain-piercing energy, becoming more and more proficient, but the consumption was also very high. After a period of time, Chu Mu finally hammered the sword embryo into shape. Next, he needed to quench the water. This water was not ordinary water, but a type of cold spring water. The quenching of the water was even better. This is the first king-grade sword that I have forged. Chu Mu pulled out the sword from the cold spring water and looked at it carefully. The entire sword was cyan in color, as if there was a stream of light flowing on the sword. This was an ordinary sword. In terms of quality, it could only be considered an ordinary king-grade sword. Of course, this was only Chu Mu's practice. It was a preparation before he forged the Desolation Sword. Take a rest and recover your strength. Let's begin forging the Desolate Sky Sword. An hour later, Chu Mu took out many upper-grade spirit stones for the green steel fire to burn. Then he took out pieces of metal, all of which were needed to forge the Desolate Sky Sword. The method of forging the Tianhuang sword was very clear in the Tianhuang sword scripture. Every step was very detailed. Chu Mu had already understood it very well and had even simulated it in his mental world. All the metals needed to forge the Desolate sword were here. There was only one chance, and failure was not an option. Chu Mu was extremely confident. Taking a deep breath, he began to throw the metal into the azure steel fire. The first step was to extract the essence of the metal and fuse the various essences to form a composite metal. The second step was to temper the composite metal and forge it into a sword embryo. The third step was to temper the sword embryo into a real sword. There were no special requirements for the appearance of the Tianhuang sword. It could be forged according to one's preferences. This was because the Tianhuang sword was born to carry the Tianhuang sword essence. The Tianhuang sword essence was different from ordinary sword essence. Under normal circumstances, it was difficult for a king-grade sword to unleash the true power of the Tianhuang sword essence. These metals were not ordinary metals. It was not easy to melt them with the temperature of the green steel fire. After spending a full 4 hours, Chu Mu finally melted the dozen pieces of metal and extracted the essence within. He followed the order and method recorded in the heavenly desolate sword scripture and mixed them together. Finally, he poured the mixed metal essence liquid into the mold to form the shape of a sword embryo. When the sword embryo was solidified, it was removed and baked in the green steel fire. The sword embryo became red inside and out. He placed it on the iron felt and began to hammer it. This kind of hammering required sufficient skill. It could not be done by simply hammering. This was also why to become a master swordsmith or grandmaster swordsmith, one had to study the great swordsmith technique meticulously and spend time practicing hard. The mountain-quaking energy instantly shook and tempered the sword embryo. In an instant, the mountain-piercing energy entered the sword embryo and tempered the sword embryo. In this way, the impurities in the sword embryo were constantly removed. First, he hammered the sword embryo dozens of times. The appearance of the sword embryo changed little by little. Then, Chu Mu changed to a smaller black iron hammer. The hammering strength was less than half of the previous one. Now, the appearance of the king-grade sword was basically complete. The next step was the sculpting process. The small black iron hammer quickly and briefly hammered the sword body, gradually changing the appearance of the sword body in Chu Mu's mind. This was a very delicate job. It was not something that could be done casually. It had to be constantly infused with the technique of the heaven-quaking fusion sword forging technique. Time slowly passed. Chu Mu's muscles constantly bulged and contracted as he waved the black iron hammer. His sweat glistened under the light of the green steel fire, as if it was smeared with a layer of oil. After 6 hours, the sword under Chu Mu's black iron hammer was almost complete. He hammered it again and again. When it was almost cold, he placed it in the green steel fire and roasted it until it turned red. He continued hammering it repeatedly. After another 2 hours, Chu Mu suddenly exerted force. He vigorously hammered the sword body with the small black iron hammer. It produced an ear-piercing sound that turned into a sound wave. It was as clear as the ripples in the water. Throwing down the black iron hammer, Chu Mu plunged the sword into the cold spring to quench it. A sizzling sound rang out, and a large amount of white smoke rose in spirals, filling the surroundings. After a quarter of an hour, the sword cooled down. Chu Mu pulled it out of the cold spring water. His right hand held the sword hilt in front of him as he carefully examined it. The sword's appearance was exactly the same as the eight-faced Han sword on Earth. The eight-faced Han sword looked majestic and had an invisible, domineering aura. It was upright and plain-spoken. It was Chu Mu's favorite sword. On Earth, Chu Mu used an eight-faced Han sword that was specially made for him by a famous blacksmith. That sword had accompanied him for many years, until he died and transmigrated. In the past, Chu Mu did not know how to forge a sword. In addition, he did not have the time to forge a sword, so he would use whatever sword he got. Today, he could forge a sword for himself, and it was a sword that was most suitable for him. Naturally, he would forge a sword that he liked. The length of the sword was 110 centimeters. The hilt was 25 centimeters long. The crossguard was 8 centimeters long, and the blade was 77 centimeters long. The width of the crossguard was 2 centimeters, the tip was 2 centimeters, and the width was 8 centimeters. As for the weight, because the density of the dozen or so metals was very high, far higher than that of ordinary steel, and after extracting the essence, infusing it, and constantly tempering it, the density was even higher, and the weight was more than 50 kilograms. Of course, the weight of 50 kilograms was nothing to Chu Mu's current physical strength. It was as easy as a strong adult holding a tree branch. There were 4 sides on each side of the sword, and they were faintly golden in color. There were countless patterns on the sword that looked like feathers and clouds. It was like an ancient world. There was a faint ancient aura that was emitted from the sword. It was the fluctuation of the desolate heaven chi. The blade on the left and right sides of the sword was not golden, but a very obvious blood-red color. It was extremely thin and constantly flashed with an astonishing sharpness, incomparably fierce. As for the tip of the sword, there was also an extremely thin scarlet light. It seemed to be restrained, but also seemed to be about to burst out. Those who had not reached the origin realm would not dare to look directly at the sword, because the sharpness was too strong. It was so strong that their vision could not bear it. Eight-sided, desolate heaven sword. With a light wave, the incomparably sharp blade seemed to cut through the void, leaving behind a trail of blood that was hard to see with the naked eye. It disappeared in the blink of an eye. Chu Mu casually stabbed with the sword, as if it had pierced through the void in front of him. Only then did an incomparably fierce sound rang out. With ease, Chu Mu could now stab with a sword that surpassed the speed of sound. Good sword. The voice of the Azura sword of Gojoseon was heard. His soul did not appear. It is a good sword. Chu Mu nodded. His left index and middle finger slowly stroked the body of the eight-sided, desolate heaven sword. It is also a top royal grade sword, extremely powerful. Your great sword forging art has already embarked on its own path. The Azura sword of Gojoseon pondered for a moment, then said, "But right now you're only in the beginning stages of becoming a master. The path to becoming a great master is still very far away." "I do not wish to become a great master," Chu Mu said. A great sword forging master could forge royal grade swords, while a great sword forging master could forge royal grade swords, which were powerful swords suitable for sword saints. There was a huge difference between royal grade swords and royal grade swords. This was Chu Mu's second time forging a royal grade sword. Because of the materials and his own great sword forging art, he was able to forge a top royal grade sword, which was enough for him at the moment. At the very least, when he became a sword saint or the sword of Gojoseon, this eight-sided, desolate heaven sword would be enough for him to use for a long time. As for becoming a sword saint in the future, he would consider a royal grade sword. With your current progress, you will be able to break through to the origin realm within half a year. At that time, your strength will increase by leaps and bounds. The Azura sword of Gojoseon said. Although he rarely spoke in the past year, he was very clear about Chu Mu's progress. This speed was much faster than when he passed through the 9th transformation realm. The Azura sword of Gojoseon really wanted to take Chu Mu as his last disciple and teach him the Azura sword way. Unfortunately, Chu Mu had his own ideals and goals. From his words, it was obvious that he did not want to take him as his master. The Azura sword of Gojoseon could only take a step back. However, Xiao Qianfeng's talent was indeed not bad. It was completely possible for him to become his disciple. The eight-sided desolate heaven sword is finished. Next, I will forge a scabbard. As he spoke, Chu Mu took out some metal and melted it again. The forging of a scabbard was not that difficult. After 4 hours, Chu Mu finished forging a suitable scabbard. He stored it in his space bracelet and left the sword forging room. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qijian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 514. The Tian Huang sword was successfully forged, and it was even Chu Mu's favorite eight-faced Han sword. This made Chu Mu feel joy from the bottom of his heart, and he even had a slight smile on his face. However, when he saw the note on the shop's door, his face immediately turned gloomy. With a flick of his finger, the note instantly turned into dust. The Bao Sword House. Chu Mu's murderous words seeped out from between his teeth. His face returned to its usual calm and cold state, and one could not tell if he was happy, angry, sad, or happy. Only the occasional flash of murderous intent in his eyes was like cold lightning. He did not understand why the people from the Bao Sword House would kidnap his shop's waiter, Fong Lu. The only thing he was sure of was that the reason they kidnapped Fong Lu was to force him to show himself. It was funny to say that he had been staying in the Bao Sword House all this time. Now he had just left the Bao Sword House's room, and this kind of thing had already happened. What was the purpose of the other party forcing him to show himself? Chu Mu also did not understand. Turning around, he strode towards the Bao Sword House. Not long after, Chu Mu arrived at the first floor of the Bao Sword House. There were many people coming and going at the Bao Sword House. Therefore, even though Chu Mu had just left the Bao Sword House, no one recognized him. "Where is Situ Feng?" Chu Mu directly asked the shopkeeper of the first floor of the Bao Sword House. The Bao Sword House was the property of the Situ family in the Tianfeng County. The Situ family was a huge family, and although Chu Mu did not know much about them, he knew that the Situ family had a long history and was not simple. According to the note from before, if he wanted to find a waiter, he had to go to the Bao Sword House to find young Master Situ Feng. "Your surname is Chu?" The shopkeeper looked at Chu Mu and asked. Obviously, he had been briefed. Chu Mu nodded. His cold expression made the shopkeeper on the first floor a little flustered. He quickly called for a waiter and asked him to take Chu Mu to find young Master Situ. On the fourth floor of the Bao Sword Tower, the waiter stopped at the stairs. With his status, he was not allowed to go up. Chu Mu stood at the top of the stairs. He could feel a few powerful auras, all of which had reached the origin realm. Then, Chu Mu's sharp senses picked up a very weak aura that was somewhat familiar. Walking up the stairs and appearing on the fourth floor of the Bao Sword Tower, a few gazes landed on Chu Mu. They were not surprised at all. Instead, one of them even had a hint of ridicule and mockery. Chu Mu swept his eyes over the fourth floor. There were a total of 5 people on the fourth floor. His waiter, Fong Lu, was among them. However, it was as if he had been immobilized and was sitting on a chair, not moving at all. Only his eyes were moving around, carrying a bit of anxiety. Among the other 4 people, there was a young swordsman in white who was in his 20s. There were 2 middle-aged swordsmen who looked similar to each other in their 40s. The last person was a woman in her 20s who was dressed like a maid. Chu Mu recognized one of them. It was the Origin Realm swordsman who had caused trouble at his shop before. In the end, he gave away a bottle of great recovery pellets. With Chu Mu's current eyesight, he could tell that the swordsman was at the Origin Realm, Deshang. Both sides didn't say anything as they sized each other up. Chu Mu was able to clearly see the cultivation of the 4 people. Other than the person he saw before who was at the late stage of the Origin Realm, the other middle-aged swordsman was at the peak stage of the Origin Realm, while the servant girl was at the initial stage of the Origin Realm. However, her aura was weak, clearly not due to her hard work. As for the white-clothed young man, he was at the initial stage of the Origin Realm, but his aura was very stable. If the maid were to fight with the young man in white, the young man in white would be able to kill her within a few moves. After all, the difference in foundation between the 2 was too great. One should have relied on external forces, while the other relied on his own hard work and the accumulation of abundant resources to cultivate. There was a fundamental difference between the 2. "Since Master Chu is here, please take a seat." The young man in white waved his hand and smiled. Then he ordered the middle-aged swordsman beside him, "Go and release that guy." "Yes, master." The middle-aged swordsman in the complete Origin Realm appeared in front of Fong Lu. He reached out his hand and tapped Fong Lu's body a dozen times. Fong Lu regained his ability to move. Chu Mu could tell that it was a method to cut off meridians. It was somewhat similar to acupuncture points. It was indeed a good method to imprison someone with a lower cultivation. "Master." Fong Lu regained his ability to move. He immediately stood up and walked towards Chu Mu with a face full of shame. "Don't feel burdened. Go back to the shop first." Chu Mu said, "Okay." Fong Lu nodded. He knew that with his cultivation, he would not be of any use even if he stayed. He might even drag Master Chu down. Leaving was the best choice. As soon as Fong Lu left, Chu Mu no longer had any worries. "Master Situ, why are you looking for me?" Chu Mu's tone was very cold. "Master Chu, you are unhappy because we used some tricks to find you." Situ Feng smiled. He had the confidence and calmness of someone who had everything under control. His tone was neither fast nor slow. We have heard of Master Chu's reputation and have been looking for you for many days. Unfortunately, we have not been able to find you. Master Chu, as you can see, your waiter was not harmed at all. I believe Master Chu also understands my sincerity. His tone was somewhat haughty. Tell me why you are looking for me. Chu Mu was a little disgusted by his attitude. Master Chu, there is no need to rush. Situ Feng maintained a smile and said, I am the second master of the Situ family. This time, I have been ordered to come to the Sword Treasure House in the Tianfeng County to make some achievements. Therefore, I need to recruit talents. I have seen Master Chu's supreme rank sword, and it is indeed a top-notch supreme rank sword. It is not inferior to the supreme rank swords made by some master swordsmiths. Chu Mu did not say anything, but he already understood the other party's meaning. They were trying to recruit him. With a little guess, he could roughly guess what the Situ Feng meant. He was sent out by the family to gain experience, possibly to become the next patriarch. Before that, he needed to make some achievements. Naturally, he would need the help of various talents. My Situ family has a history of more than 5,000 years. We have a deep foundation and specialize in sword forging. In the whole family, there are many master swordsmiths. In the main family, there is even a master swordsmithing master. Situ Feng continued, Master Chu is so young, yet he is able to forge top-notch supreme rank swords. In the future, becoming a master swordsman is not a problem. As long as Master Chu joins the Sword Treasure House and becomes a professional swordsmith, I, Situ Feng, guarantee that Master Chu will receive the treatment of a master swordsman. Moreover, Master Chu will have the right to read the swordsmithing experiences of master swordsmiths. In the future, if there is a chance, I also guarantee that Master Chu will receive guidance from a master swordsman. It had to be said that Situ Feng's offer was very generous. If Chu Mu was only a true master swordsmith, and the kind of person who was determined to go further on the path of swordsmithing, he would definitely be very tempted. He would not hesitate to accept Situ Feng's offer. A master would enjoy the treatment of a master swordsman. He would be able to read the swordsmithing experiences of a master swordsman, and even have the chance to receive guidance from a master swordsman. Since ancient times, how many master swordsmiths were unable to become master swordsmiths? And how many master swordsmiths were unable to become master swordsmiths? The path of swordsmithing was just like the path of the sword. Everyone wanted to reach the end, but not everyone could reach the end. After Situ Feng finished speaking, he calmly stared at Chu Mu with a smile on his face. In his opinion, Chu Mu's acceptance was inevitable, and he would even be overjoyed. The Sword Treasure House. As long as one was a swordsmith, who would not know about the Sword Treasure House? Unless one was from a remote corner of the world. One had to know that many swordsmiths would break their heads to become a professional swordsmith of the Sword Treasure House. It was a kind of opportunity. If that's all you want to say, then I'm not interested. Chu Mu decisively rejected and stood up. Don't bother me again. My time is very precious. After he finished speaking, Chu Mu walked towards the stairs. The smile on Situ Feng's face suddenly froze, and his face was filled with shock. The other three were the same. This was too different from what they had imagined, and they could not react for a while. Seeing Chu Mu walk to the stairs, everyone finally reacted. The middle-aged Origin Realm swordsman named Desheng suddenly snorted angrily. His body flashed and jumped in front of Chu Mu, blocking his path. The other middle-aged swordsman also stared at Chu Mu with a pair of clear eyes, one hand holding the hilt of his sword. You can't recruit me, so you want to force me? Chu Mu was not afraid at all. Instead, he glanced at Situ Feng and said with a faint smile. His tone was filled with disdain. Even if they really wanted to fight, he was not afraid at all. Perhaps he might not be a match for these people. But if Chu Mu really wanted to leave, they might not be able to stop him either. If they really pissed off Chumu, he could just release the meteor sword yuan and kill them all. Let him go. Situ Feng frowned and waved his hand. The Origin Realm Deshang swordsman glanced at Chumu fiercely and unwillingly moved aside. Chumu did not say a word. He withdrew his gaze and walked down the stairs. He walked to the first floor and left the sword treasure house. Master, why are you letting this person go? The maid asked. I can't see through him. Situ Feng frowned again and said, in his eyes, Chumu looked very strange. He could not see through him at all. Chi-Hai realm? No, Origin realm? That's not true either. Could it be the 9th transformation realm? This was because only ordinary people and 9th transformation realm swordsmen would not have any sword energy fluctuations. Ordinary people did not cultivate. So how could there be sword energy fluctuations? As for 9th transformation realm swordsmen, it was because all the sword energy was sealed within their bodies. As long as they did not use it, there would not be sword energy fluctuations. This situation was very strange. Situ Feng also denied the idea that Chumu was a 9th transformation realm swordsman. After all, which 9th transformation realm swordsman would dare to appear in public like this? After all, even with the Situ family's ability, they would not know about the ancient matters. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qijin. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 5:15. In a flash, 3 months had passed. Young master, I found it. I finally found it. The sword guard of Deshang hurriedly ran up to the 4th floor of the House of Treasured Sword. Speak. The eyes of Situ Feng, who was holding a book, flashed. He immediately put the book to the side and said, Don't worry. This Master Chu's real name is Chumu. The middle-aged sword guard handed a piece of paper to Situ Feng. Situ Feng took it and quickly read through it. The Situ family had 5,000 years of history. Among all the families in the central main sword domain, this was one of the most profound families. However, compared to the entire central main sword domain, the Situ family was actually not that powerful, especially when compared to some of the stronger sections. Apart from the top 10 sword sects, there were many other sects that were stronger than the Situ family. Due to the limitations of their strength, their ability to gather information was naturally limited as well. Furthermore, Situ Feng was not the head of the Situ family, so he could only use a portion of his authority. It took him a full 3 months to find Master Chu's information. If Chumu was here to see the contents of the paper, he would definitely be shocked. Zhen Tian sword hero Chumu from the Eastern Sword Domain. He reached the 32nd floor of the Heavenly Sword Tower and is ranked first on the Heavenly Sword Hero ranking. No one can shake his position. Situ Feng repeated the important information on the paper. His eyes were reserved and his face was cold. No one knew what he was thinking. Are you sure the information on this paper is accurate? After a while, Situ Feng looked at the middle-aged sword guard and asked coldly, I've checked it repeatedly, and I'm very sure. The middle-aged sword guard spoke with absolute certainty. Shortly after, he revealed a doubtful expression. This Chumu reached the 32nd level of the Heavenly Sword Tower more than a year ago and was ranked first on the Heavenly Sword ranking. No one could shake his position. At that time, he should have accumulated to the limit. Now he should be at the 9th transformation realm and should be in seclusion to pass the 9th transformation realm. This was not only the middle-aged sword guard's doubt, but also Situ Feng's doubt. Based on their many years of experience, once one broke through to the 9th transformation realm, one would have to find a secluded place to go into seclusion. Only after passing the 9th transformation realm and reaching the origin realm would one appear again. However, Chumu made them feel extremely puzzled. Could it be that the current Chumu had yet to break through to the 9th transformation realm? To be honest, this possibility was extremely small. After all, Chu Mu had already reached the 32nd floor of the Heavenly Sword Tower more than a year ago. Besides him, the second-ranked Zhong Qingtian, the third-ranked Zhu Wudao, and the fourth-ranked Injiu had also reached the 32nd floor. However, they had only just entered the 32nd floor and were defeated in less than 60 breaths of time. That was why Chu Mu had been able to dominate the Heavenly Sword hero role for over a year, and no one had been able to shake his position. If that kind of result was not his best, then wouldn't it be too shocking? Suddenly, Situ Feng's eyes widened, and a terrifying light shot out. He thought of a possibility, and this possibility made his heart beat wildly. Where is Chu Mu now? Situ Feng stood up and hurriedly asked. He left the Tianfeng province a month ago and entered the Windy Fire Desert. I don't know where he went, the middle-aged sword guard hurriedly replied. The Windy Fire Desert. Situ Feng also felt a headache. The Windy Fire Desert was too large, dozens of times larger than the Tianfeng province. It was also very dangerous, and it was extremely difficult to find a person in it. Young master, according to my calculations, the ancient sword tomb in the Windy Fire Desert should be opening soon. At that time, many people will definitely rush over. I think that Chu Mu will definitely go as well. The middle-aged sword guard thought hard for a while, then clapped his hands and said, The ancient sword tomb opening. Situ Feng walked to the window with his hands behind his back and looked at the sky outside. He muttered to himself, If this Chu Mu is currently at the 9th transformation realm, then he must have some backup plan that allowed him to appear outside. Perhaps there is some secret behind it. If I can obtain this secret, perhaps it will increase my chances of competing for the position of patriarch. The Windy Fire Desert was a famous forbidden area in the central main sword region. Within the Windy Fire Desert, the temperature was extremely high. From time to time, there would be strong winds and sand blowing. Even Qi Transformation Realm swordsmen would feel unbearably hot. Even Qi Sea Realm swordsmen would feel thirsty. The moisture in their bodies would quickly evaporate, and their sword Qi would be affected as well, becoming harder to control than usual. Throughout the year, the astral winds and earth fire would wreak havoc. Once they encountered the astral winds, Qi Transformation Realm swordsmen would disappear within 10 breaths of time. Even Qi Sea Realm swordsmen would only be able to hold on for a little longer. They would have to leave the area of the astral winds as soon as possible, or else they would also end up being eroded. As for the earth fire, it was even more terrifying. Once Qi Sea Realm swordsmen encountered the earth fire, they would instantly turn into ashes. Even original realm swordsmen would suffer great injuries. Moreover, the earth fire in the Windy Fire Desert had another characteristic. Once it came into contact with a human body, it would continue to burn. From a small spark, it would become a prairie fire. Normal methods would not be able to extinguish it. Within the Windy Fire Desert, there were no demonic beasts. There were only sand beasts, one of the strange beasts. Only sand beasts could survive in the Windy Fire Desert. It could be said that there were all sorts of strange things in this world. At this moment, in the outskirts of the Windy Fire Desert, in a rather remote area, there was a huge rock that had been eroded into a natural cave by countless sandstorms. On the dry ground, there was a figure sitting cross-legged. The entrance of the cave was sealed by a sword Qi, preventing the strong wind and sand from blowing into the cave. Thus, it was unable to affect the person inside the cave. This person was Chu Mu, who had left the Tianfeng region a month ago. A month ago, Chu Mu had already reached the 9th revolution of the 9 transformation realm. Now that he had accumulated enough, he planned to break through the 9 transformation realm and enter the original realm. At this moment, Chu Mu was cultivating the 3rd section of the Heavenly Baron Sword Qi Manual, Yuan Condensation Section. The purpose of the Yuan Condensation Section was to condense the Heavenly Baron Sword Qi after the 9 transformation realm. After 10 times of compression and condensation, there would be a qualitative change, forming an even more powerful Sword Yuan. The difference between Sword Yuan and Sword Qi was huge, at least 10 times. In other words, the power released by one portion of Sword Yuan was at least comparable to 10 portions of Sword Qi, or even more. One could imagine that with Chu Mu's strength, once he broke through to the original realm, it would be extremely shocking. A month ago, Chu Mu had dismissed Fang Lu because he no longer planned to continue operating the sword forging shop. Before Chu Mu left, he gave Fang Lu some spiritual stones and some sword arts to end their relationship, because when he broke through to the original realm, there would be a lot of commotion. People would definitely guess that he was in the 9 transformation realm before, which might cause some unnecessary trouble. Without a doubt, the Windy Fire Desert was a very suitable place for breaking through. Although there were many swordsmen who entered the Windy Fire Desert, the area was huge. If one wanted to hide, it would not be easy for others to find him. Moreover, even if the commotion caused by breaking through is noticed, it would not cause as much trouble as breaking through in the Tianfeng province. The sword Qi at the entrance of the cave was laid down by the Azura, sword of Gojoseon. Even if the people of the sword of Gojoseon found this place, they would not be able to enter. If they tried to force their way in, they would be killed by the counterattack. Sitting cross-legged in the cave, Chu Mu closed his eyes and circulated the Yuan condensation section over and over again. The Yuan condensation section focused more on one's spiritual will. Using one's spiritual will to drive, it would further compress and condense the first transformation realm Sword Qi into Sword Yuan. Chu Mu's soul was very powerful. Naturally, his spiritual will was stronger than the average swordsman, and the efficiency of condensing Sword Qi was also higher. Now, Chu Mu had reached the final moment. The 9 transformation, Heavenly Baron, Sword Qi in his body had been condensed to the extreme and was beginning to liquefy. Sword Qi existed in the form of a gas, while Sword Yuan existed in the form of a liquid. The change in form meant an increase in quality. Every time he circulated the Yuan condensation section, the 9 transformation realm Sword Qi would further refine his powerful body, causing the strength of his body to increase once again. In other words, other than the Heavenly Baron Sword Qi that was about to condense into Sword Yuan, Chu Mu's Heavenly Baron sword physique was about to break through to the 2nd level. Although the Azura sword of Gojoseon did not appear, his mind was able to cover the outside world. Everything about Chu Mu was clearly within his mind. Breaking through to the origin realm in less than a year and a half. Such a speed is truly shocking. Unfortunately, such a person cannot become my disciple, the Azura sword of Gojoseon sighed to himself. I wonder how far he will go in the future? Sword Saint? Or challenge the legendary Sword God? Chu Mu's mind was highly concentrated, not daring to be distracted in the slightest. He circulated the Yuan condensation section again and again, refining the 9 transformation realm Sword Qi in his body bit by bit. Gradually, the gaseous Heavenly Baron sword physique in his body began to change, as if it was about to turn into a liquid, condensing like water vapor. The rumbling sound was like thunder, rumbling within his meridians. The purity of the 9 transformation realm Sword Qi was much higher than ordinary 9 transformation realm Sword Qi. When it was circulated, the burden on his meridians was even more obvious. If not for the fact that Chu Mu had already mastered the 1st level of the Heavenly Baron sword physique and was about to break through to the 2nd level, he would not have been able to withstand such an impact. Under Chu Mu's continuous compression, the first drop of Sword Yuan finally appeared. Like a drop of water, it flowed along his meridians and fell into his dantian, floating up and down in his dantian. This was a good start. Following that, the 2nd drop of Sword Yuan was formed. The 3rd drop, the 4th drop, the 5th drop after drop of Heavenly Baron Sword Yuan was condensed by Chu Mu. Chu Mu's mind and willpower were also rapidly depleted, and his face gradually turned pale. This was an unstoppable breakthrough. Chu Mu had to persevere until all of the Heavenly Baron Sword Qi was condensed into Heavenly Baron Sword Yuan. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 5:16. A drop of water becomes a river, and hundreds of rivers flow into the sea. The last ball of Sky Baron Sword Qi was condensed into Sky Baron Sword Energy under Chu Mu's powerful intent. Within his dantian, a small pool appeared. The lake was golden in color, like a desert under the sun. The last drop of sword energy flowed along his meridians and finally dripped into the lake. A ding-dong sound was heard, and layers of ripples spread out. All of the Sky Baron Sword Qi had been refined into Sky Baron Sword Energy. The powerful sword energy had condensed into a lake within Chu Mu's dantian. It contained an unparalleled power. Once it was released, it would instantly turn Chu Mu into nothingness. Even the surrounding 10,000 meters would be bombarded by the terrifying energy. It was a power that could instantly shatter a Qi-high realm sword warrior. When the last drop of sword energy fell into his dantian, Chu Mu's mental intent suddenly entered a strange state. Under this state, his essence, qi, and soul continued to rise, breaking through the limits and reaching new heights. Everything in the surroundings was under his control. In the outside world, the heaven and earthling qi continued to vibrate, gathering above the cave where Chu Mu was training. Countless strong winds blew from afar, scorching hot. As they gathered, a 10,000-meter wide whirlpool appeared, and it was still expanding. Heaven and earth anomaly. Such a strong heaven and earth-ling qi movement. Could it be that some kind of treasure is about to appear? No! This should be a heaven and earth anomaly when a sword warrior breaks through from the 9th transformation realm to the origin realm. Breaking through to the origin realm? But this movement is too big. Look at the heaven and earth ling qi whirlpool. It has already reached 100,000 meters in size, and it is still expanding. This is too unbelievable. When a normal swordsman breaks through to the origin realm, there will only be a 10,000-meter wide heaven and earth ling qi vortex. Who is this person? He must be a genius, a true genius, for him to be able to trigger a whirlpool of heaven and earth spiritual qi within a radius of at least 100,000 meters. That's strange. Why isn't a heaven and earth spiritual qi vortex gushing downwards like other people's breakthroughs? Only strands of yellowish-brown gas are falling down. Breaking through to the origin realm and possessing the heaven and earth spiritual qi within 100,000-meter radius. Could it be Chu Mu? A middle-aged swordsman's eyes flashed. He raised his head and looked at the huge vortex of heaven and earth spiritual qi in the distant sky. His body moved, and he turned into a stream of light and quickly flew over. The swordsmen who were in the wind-fire desert and saw the phenomenon of Chu Mu breaking through to the origin realm did not know that what Chu Mu cultivated was the sky desolation sword scripture. What he absorbed was desolation qi and not spiritual qi. Normally, when a swordsman broke through, the heaven and earth spiritual qi vortex would flow downwards and be absorbed by the swordsman, turning into sword energy. After all, the amount of sword energy condensed into sword energy was at most 1/10 of the original amount. This amount of sword energy could not even reach the entry level of the origin realm. Therefore, it was urgent to refine a large amount of heaven and earth spiritual qi and turn it into sword energy. Because the quality of sword energy was too high, it usually required a large amount of heaven and earth spiritual qi and a long period of time to complete and truly enter the entry level of the origin realm. However, Chu Mu cultivated the sky desolation sword qi and absorbed desolation qi. Within the wind-fire desert, because of the existence of endless yellow sand, there was also desolation qi. However, compared to spiritual qi, it was not even 1/10 of desolation qi. The desolation qi was yellowish-brown, and normal people would not be able to recognize it. Therefore, the swordsmen were puzzled. Strands of desolation chi flowed down from the heaven and earth spiritual chi vortex, passing through the cave and entering Chu Mu's body. He used the method recorded in the Sky Desolation Sword Manual to condense it and turn it into Sky Desolation Sword Energy. It dripped into his dantian, causing the small pond in his dantian to expand bit by bit. This was a spontaneous process that did not require Chu Mu to control. His mind was immersed in this strange state, and all kinds of realizations appeared one after another like a river. Sword intent, ripping profound, illusory profound, water profound, fire profound on Chu Mu's body. There was first a shocking sharpness that seemed to pierce through the clouds. Soon, it turned into a sharpness that could tear everything apart. Following that, it turned into an illusory aura that was difficult to distinguish between real and fake. It was like clouds and mist. With another flash, it was like an endless stream of water. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a raging fire that seemed to want to burn everything down. Increase, and increase again. Originally, Chu Mu's sword intent had reached 41%. But now, in this indescribable and unique state, his sword intent started to increase at an unimaginable speed. 42%, 43%, 44%, 45%. After Chu Mu's sword intent rapidly increased to 45%, it suddenly paused and felt like it could no longer rapidly increase. Subconsciously, Chu Mu immediately changed his target and started comprehending ripping profound. Such an opportunity was hard to come by, and he could not waste it on a sword intent that could not be increased quickly. The 20% ripping profound began to increase. Compared to 41% sword intent, the comprehension speed of 20% lacerating profound was much faster. Not long after, it reached 30%. Unable to increase it any further, Chu Mu immediately shifted his attention to illusionary profound. After a while, the 20% ripping profound also increased to 30%. Since it could not be increased quickly, Chu Mu changed his target again to the water profound. The water profound was at 10%. Under this state, it increased to 20%. Soon after, the fire profound also increased from 10% to 20%. Just when Chu Mu wanted to increase the other mentalities to the profound level, he suddenly realized that the state had disappeared. Currently, Chu Mu had grasped 4 types of profounds. 2 of them were even high-rank, mutated profounds. Even if he had reached the peak of his other realms, even if he had reached the origin realm, it wouldn't be easy for him to grasp the 5th type of profounds. The more profound one had, the harder it would be to comprehend. Sometimes, it was better to bite off more than one could chew. Since he had escaped from this state, Chu Mu did not force it. From the looks of it, for profound was enough. In the sky above the cave, the heaven and earth spiritual chi vortex that spanned over 100,000 meters started to dissipate. The sky, desolate, sword yuan in Chu Mu's dantian had not been fully replenished. In other words, he had only just entered the origin realm and had not reached the entry realm. Of course, the strength of the sword yuan was not any weaker than the entry realm. It was just that the amount of sword yuan had not reached the entry realm. The sword intent had reached 45%, the ripping profound had reached 30%, the ripping profound had reached 30%, the ripping profound had reached 30%, the water profound had reached 20%, and the fire profound had reached 20%. This was Chu Mu's current strength. Just from the data alone, Chu Mu had already surpassed many normal entry, realm origin, realm swordsmen. Even some normal Deshang and perfection realm swordsmen could not compare to Chu Mu. However, Chu Mu's true competition was the geniuses, the true geniuses. Since they were geniuses, they were naturally different from normal people. Their true strength could not be determined by their cultivation base. This was because a swordsman's strength was composed of many aspects. Although there was an obvious difference in cultivation base, it was not the only difference. After all, the origin realm was different from the Chi-Hai realm. In the Chi-Hai realm, the difference in cultivation base was not very obvious. But in the origin realm, the difference between entry realm and minor completion in Deshang and perfection realm would be magnified by a few times. If there was not much difference in the sword intent profound, then cultivation base would be the deciding factor. Although Chu Mu was clear about his current cultivation and comprehension level of sword intent profound, he wasn't sure how strong he was right now. That was because he had just broken through to the origin realm, so there was nothing to compare with. There were many aspects to a swordsman's strength, and it was difficult to make an accurate judgment. Although he had broken through, Chu Mu did not leave immediately. Instead, he began to comprehend the sword skill. The original sword skill only had sword intent and no sword essence. It could only be replaced by the power of conception and sword chi. It was an incomplete sword skill, but now the sword chi had condensed into sword essence, and the conception had been upgraded to profound. It was time to perfect the sword skill. Beheading moon, beheading iron, beheading strike. Not only that, Chu Mu also planned to create a new sword skill that would combine the profound of water and profound of fire. When the time came, its power would definitely be stronger than beheading moon. Chu Mu had comprehended beheading moon countless times before. At that time, it was only because he did not have sword essence and profound. But now, with sword essence and profound, Chu Mu had perfected beheading moon to a perfect level in just a few moments. The only thing that Chu Mu felt was a pity was that beheading moon had its limitations. It could only carry 39% sword intent at most. This was something that could not be changed. Instead of spending a lot of time to change it, it would be better to create a new sword skill. Now, Chu Mu really wanted to find someone to test the power of beheading moon. Suppressing this impulse, Chu Mu continued to comprehend how to combine the profound of water and profound of fire, two completely opposite profound of fire. Although the water profound and the fire profound were just ordinary profound, because of their opposite attributes, it was several times more difficult to fuse them than the water profound and the metal profound. However, once the fusion was successful, the power that could be unleashed would be at least twice as powerful as the fusion of the water profound and the metal profound. As long as he could successfully combine the profound of water and profound of fire and create a sword skill that was even more powerful than beheading moon, Chu Mu's strength would definitely increase by a lot. Time passed slowly. After a while, the profound of water and profound of fire still could not be combined. The difficulty was too high. If he forced it, it would probably explode instantly, leaving him with nothing left. Forget it. The opportunity is not there yet, so I can't force it. Chu Mu shook his head and gave up on the fusion of the profound of water and profound of fire. In this aspect, the Azura sword of Gojosian could not help him because the Azura sword of Gojosian did not have the profound of water and profound of fire. Getting up, the Azura sword of Gojosian broke the sword chi seal around the cave. Chu Mu strode out, and the wind and clouds in the sky changed. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 517. After reaching the origin realm, Chu Mu's perception had increased tenfold. He closed his eyes, and with a thought, his mental power instantly radiated out from his mental world, covering an area of 1,000 meters. Everything was clearly displayed in Chu Mu's perception. Just as Chu Mu's mental world had expanded by a few times, a vast expanse of yellow sand appeared. If one were to look closely, they would discover that it was actually Chu Mu's mental power radiating out, covering an area of 1,000 meters. Whether it was sand or rocks, everything was clearly visible. Even the dust particles floating in the air could be clearly felt by Chu Mu. This wonderful feeling was like a fish returning to the sea, swimming freely. The origin realm was not only about condensing sword chi into sword energy. but also expanding one's mental world to the point of being able to release mental power. Ordinary Origin Realm swordsmen could release their mental power to a range of 100 meters. As their cultivation increased, their mental power would slowly increase, and the range would increase as well. However, even a complete Origin Realm swordsman could only release their mental power to a range of 500 meters. Of course, this only applied to ordinary Origin Realm swordsmen. Those who were born with powerful mental power, possessed techniques to refine mental power, or had some fortuitous encounter to greatly increase their mental power were not included. However, people like Chu Mu, who could release their mental power to a range of 1,000 meters upon reaching the Origin Realm, were extremely rare. One could imagine that as Chu Mu's cultivation increased, the range of his mental power would increase as well. At this moment, a powerful sword pressure rolled over from afar. It descended from the sky and blasted towards Chu Mu. The yellow sand around Chu Mu seemed to be swept away by an invisible hand and was blown away. Origin Realm. Chu Mu retracted his mental power and raised his head to look at the source of the sword pressure. He saw a figure flying over, appearing in the sky and looking down at him. With a thought, Chu Mu's body floated into the air and shot up into the sky like an arrow. He didn't use any flying secret techniques. Astral Realm swordsmen already possessed the ability to fly. Because of their powerful spiritual energy and sword origin, they were able to escape the gravitational pull of the ground. Although it was his first time flying in the Origin Realm, Chu Mu didn't face any difficulty at all. He stably faced the swordsman from a few hundred meters above the ground. Chu Mu, it is indeed you. A cold smile appeared on the other party's face. Chu Mu didn't say anything because he clearly saw who the other party was. It was one of Situ Feng's 2 sword guards, the Origin Realm sword guard named Desheng. You were indeed in the 9th transformation realm. You didn't find a secluded place to enter seclusion and instead appeared outside. The man continued talking with a cold smile on his face, as if he had everything under his control. He was similar to Situ Feng. Shocking, this is truly shocking. You actually used less than a year and a half to pass the 9th transformation realm and break through to the Origin Realm. There must be a shocking secret behind this. Chu Mu still didn't say anything. He didn't even show any special expression. Tell me, if I were to announce this news, what kind of commotion would it cause? The middle-aged swordsman smiled proudly. Tell me your goal. Chu Mu finally opened his mouth and said indifferently, Ha ha ha. My goal is simple. As long as you follow me back to see the young master and agree to work for him, I will keep this news to myself. The middle-aged swordsman smiled. Of course, I believe that a genius like you has extraordinary strength. Even so, you don't have the strength to kill me. Once you do, I will immediately leave and spread the news. At that time, even the top 10 sword sects will be interested. A threat, a naked threat. Chu Mu could tell from the other person's tone that he wasn't joking and was serious. As long as Chu Mu didn't do as the other person said, he would definitely announce this news. At that time, regardless of whether the news was true or false, it would definitely cause a storm, and the center of the storm would be Chu Mu. At that time, he would be in endless trouble. Take a guess. Between the trouble that hasn't come yet and the threat that threatens me, which one would I choose? Chu Mu suddenly smiled and asked, It seems that you don't intend to cooperate. The middle-aged swordsman's expression turned cold. He instantly drew his sword and slashed out. In an instant, a fiery red sword light appeared. It was incomparably huge, as if it could cut through the sky. Immediately after, the middle-aged swordsman turned around and exploded with a terrifying sword origin wave. With a boom, the air shook as he turned into a ray of light and flew away. He wasn't stupid. He probably knew that with his current strength, if he wanted to kill a genius swordsman like Chu Mu, even if there was a huge gap between their cultivation bases, the success rate wasn't very high. After all, geniuses were geniuses because they often had trump cards that others didn't have. Moon slashing. Chu Mu's figure flashed and dodged the huge fiery red sword light. With a low roar, Chu Mu held the eight-sided desolation sword in his hand and slashed out. The sword origin was the bone, the sword will was the soul, and the ultimacy was the flesh. In an instant, the perfect moon slashing tore through the sky. A 10-meter-long, dark, golden crescent moon tore through the sky at lightning speed. It locked onto the Origin Realm's swordsman Desheng and approached him at a speed 10 times faster than his own. The middle-aged swordsman's body trembled. He turned around and his face turned pale. He was scared out of his wits. The aura emitted by Chu Mu's perfect moon slashing was too powerful. 39% sword will and 30% ultimacy were perfectly combined with the desolation sword origin. Furthermore, the eight-sided desolation sword was a top-notch royal-grade sword. Due to its special properties, the desolation sword origin had an obvious amplification effect. The Origin Realm swordsman Desheng's sword will had reached 40%, and his fire ultimacy had reached 50%. In addition to his powerful sword origin, he could have blocked Chu Mu's attack and not died if he had used all his strength. However, Chu Mu's attack was beyond his expectations. The speed of the moon slashing was unbelievably fast. Once again, it exceeded his expectations. By the time he reacted and mobilized the sword origin in his body, preparing to release a sword technique, the moon slashing had already arrived. It instantly tore apart his protective sword aura and his precious armor. With a ripping sound, as if a long blade had cut through flesh, the Origin Realm swordsman Desheng's body was split into 2 halves. Blood rained down like rain. Chu Mu's 39% sword will was comparable to a 49% sword will without a sword soul. The 30% ultimacy was comparable to a 60% ultimacy. As for sword origin, the desolation sword origin was more condensed than ordinary sword origin. With the amplification of the eight-sided desolation sword, it was at least 50% stronger. With such a powerful moon slashing, even if the opponent tried his best to block it, he would most likely be injured. Although the Origin Realm's swordsman Desheng did not use his full strength to block it, Chu Mu was able to roughly test the power of the moon slashing. Chu Mu's figure flashed, and he quickly landed on the ground. He picked up the royal rank sword and spatial bracer from the corpse that had fallen on the yellow sand. A flame appeared under Chu Mu's control and burned the corpse into ashes. Apart from this person, Situ Feng should also be suspicious of me. His other sword guard and maid might also know something. This is a potential problem, so I must get rid of it. Chu Mu glanced at the ashes of the corpse that was swallowed by the yellow sand and thought to himself. Traces of light flickered in his eyes. Between the trouble that had yet to come and the threat of giving in, Chu Mu was unwilling to choose. However, if he was forced to make a choice, Chu Mu would rather be in trouble than be threatened. This was his principle and his path. The sword sovereign realm requires at least 70% sword intent. Although there is no requirement for cultivation, those who can comprehend 70% sword intent should be able to reach the Origin Realm. Desheng's cultivation should be able to reach the Perfection Realm. Coupled with the increase in other profoundness, his strength should be extremely terrifying. The current me is still unable to compete with a sword sovereign realm swordsman. I wonder if senior brother Shao has broken through to the Origin Realm? Even if senior brother Shao has broken through to the Origin Realm, we would still not be a match for a sword sovereign under normal circumstances. The sky-burying sword sex Venerable Zongtian has the strength of a sword sovereign. Even the most ordinary sword sovereign's strength is above ours. If that's the case, I will wait a little longer and increase my cultivation before seeking revenge. The ancient sword tomb is about to open. There might be great opportunities inside. After staying in the Tianfeng prefecture for more than a year, Chu Mu was not oblivious to the outside world. He had gathered quite a bit of information. The Windfire Desert was a place where swordsmen trained and earned spiritual stones. It was the most suitable place for Origin Realm swordsmen. Within the Windfire Desert, there was an ancient sword tomb called the Ancient Sword Tomb. The Ancient Sword Tomb had existed for a very long time. Its exact origins were unknown. All that was known was that there were many opportunities within the Ancient Sword Tomb. One could even obtain the Sword Dao inheritance within. Of course, opportunities often coexisted with danger. The Ancient Sword Tomb contained countless dangers. One could die within if one was not careful. The Ancient Sword Tomb appeared once every 30 years. Each time, it would appear at a different location. Therefore, no one knew where the Ancient Sword Tomb would appear this time. The only thing that was certain was that the Ancient Sword Tomb would still appear in the Windfire Desert. As for the exact location, only when the signs of the Ancient Sword Tomb appeared would they know. If the time is correct, the Ancient Sword Tomb will appear in another day. Chu-Mu flew above the Windfire Desert. He wanted to see what the sand beasts of the Windfire Desert looked like. At the same time, a large number of swordsmen rushed into the Windfire Desert. Their goal was naturally the Ancient Sword Tomb that was about to appear. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 518. After rushing back, I got sick, weak, and had a stomachache. But don't worry, the Dominator of 6 realms will not stop updating. Kill. The 8-sided desolate sky, swords pierced out. The sharp power instantly penetrated the sand beast surface and directly hit the sand core. With a pop, the hard sand core shattered under the impact of the laceration, ultimacy, mountain quaking energy, and sword intent. The sand beast, which was known to have an immortal body, exploded into yellow sand that filled the sky. It spread out in all directions like a sand rain. The sand beast was a type of exotic beast. Its body was made of sand and was constantly flowing. It could greatly weaken an attack. Moreover, even if it was scattered, as long as the sand core was not broken, it could instantly reform. It was known as an immortal body. The sand core of the sand beast could move freely in its body. In other words, it was very difficult to break the sand core through the surface of the sand. The normal method that swordsmen used to deal with sand beasts was to use powerful sword skills to disperse the sand beasts. Then they would destroy the sand core before it could reform into a new body. However, it was not easy. It required extraordinary eyesight, incomparably fast attack speed, and a sufficiently powerful attack. Only by combining the three could one destroy the sand core and truly kill the sand beast. However, very few swordsmen would destroy the sand cores because each sand core was very valuable. They would often join forces to destroy the sand beasts and then immediately use their methods to capture the sand cores. They would then use their sword chi and other powers to temporarily seal the sand cores and bring them back to Cell. This was also the reason why many swordsmen entered the fiery wind desert. Of course, there were also some swordsmen who entered to gain experience. They would fight the sand beasts and resist the harsh environment of the fiery wind desert to improve themselves. Suddenly, there was a loud rumble. Formless sound waves spread out, turning into huge waves that rolled out. The sand in the windy fire desert was immediately swept up, turning into golden waves that surged over. With the protective sword aura around his body, Chu-Mu faced the 100-meter-tall golden wave and soared into the sky. He appeared 1,000 meters above the fiery wind desert and looked in the direction of the rumbling sound. Subsequently, the Windfire Desert began to tremble. Boom! 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 An astonishing whistling sound could be heard. Golden astral winds seemed to be blowing from outer space. They whistled and seemed to be everywhere. When they blew past Chu-Mu, Chu-Mu's protective sword aura began to fluctuate. It felt as if it was about to be blown away. Chu-Mu had no choice but to increase the output of the Heavenly Wasteland sword essence to forcefully stabilize the protective sword aura. The astral winds were very frightening. Without protection, Chu Mu could not guarantee how long he would be able to withstand the onslaught of the astral winds, even with the second level of the heavenly wasteland sword body. In the next breath, there was a bang. The yellow sand below him exploded. A scarlet flame shot out like a fountain, reaching 100 meters in the air. An extremely high temperature spread out, causing the surrounding temperature to rise by 10 times. It was unbearably hot. Earth fire. The temperature of the earth fire was too high. It was not inferior to the azure steel fire required to forge a royal grade sword. Moreover, it was even more violent than the azure steel fire. Once a true realm swordsman came in contact with it, they would die on the spot. Even Chu Mu did not want to test the fire with his own body. Fortunately, he was 1,000 meters above the fiery wind desert. No matter how powerful the earth fire was, it would not be able to reach him. This commotion should be caused by the appearance of the ancient sword tomb. Chu Mu thought to himself as he turned into a stream of light and flew away at lightning speed. At the same time, there were many figures flying in the sky above the fiery wind desert. Some were alone, some were in groups of 2 or 3, and some were in groups of 5 or 6. There was even a swordsman with a pair of sword chi wings on his back. He was obviously a chi-hai swordsman. However, there were many true realm swordsmen protecting him. It was obvious that he was not from an ordinary background. From afar, Chu Mu could see that there was a ring of darkness in the fiery wind desert. It was as if an ancient beast had its mouth wide open, waiting to devour all living things. When Chu Mu arrived, there were already hundreds of true realm swordsmen present. They were either alone or in groups. Every one of them had an astonished look on their faces. Looking at the ancient and huge entrance, they could not help but feel small. Chu Mu also raised his head to look at the entrance. It was pitch black like a black hole, emitting an indescribable aura that made one tremble in fear. It was extremely mysterious. The entire entrance was 100 meters tall, like a small black hill standing in the fiery wind desert. This pitch-black entrance was the only entrance to the ancient sword tomb. If one wanted to enter the ancient sword tomb, they would have to walk through this terrifying entrance. Although there was no danger in walking through this entrance, the aura made one tremble in fear. Those who were not brave enough would not even dare to walk in. The ancient sword tomb has a total of 3 levels. Each level is more dangerous than the last, but at the same time, the rewards from each level are greater than the last. The first level is suitable for the Chi-Hai realm, the second for the 9th transformation realm, and the third for the true realm. Information about the ancient sword tomb appeared in Chu Mu's mind. Although the second level of the ancient sword tomb was suitable for the 9th transformation realm, very few 9th transformation realm swordsmen would travel outside. Therefore, there were almost no 9th transformation realm swordsmen who came here. In fact, the first level of the ancient sword tomb is suitable for sword grandmasters, the second level for normal true realm swordsmen, and the third level for powerful true realm swordsmen. The Shura sword of Gojoseon's voice suddenly rang out, directly entering Chu Mu's ears. As an ancient sword of Gojoseon, the Shura sword of Gojoseon's knowledge far surpassed Chu Mu's. He had been to the ancient sword tomb before, so he would definitely know more about it than Chu Mu. Why? Chu Mu's understanding of the ancient sword tomb was still insufficient. You will understand once you enter. The Shura sword of Gojoseon replied, with your strength, the first and second levels will not be a problem. However, you will have to be careful on the third level. Hearing this, Chu Mu's interest in the ancient sword tomb grew even more. Chu Mu, it really is you. A voice suddenly rang out from the side. Chu Mu turned around and saw Situ Feng walking over with his perfect true realm sword guards. Situ Feng had a strange smile on his face, as if he knew everything and was threatening Chu Mu. Chu Mu? I feel that this name is very familiar. Who is Chu Mu? Someone nearby was startled when he heard the name. then asked in doubt. I also feel that this name is very familiar. Many gazes fell on Chu Mu, as if they wanted to see through Chu Mu. Although Chu Mu's reputation had spread far and wide before, after more than a year, there had been many incidents, big and small, that had gradually faded from people's sight. However, Chu Mu's deeds were still remembered by many. Hearing this, Chu Mu only laughed and ignored Situ Feng. Situ Feng approached Chu Mu and stared into Chu Mu's eyes. He smiled and asked, "Oh, right, my other sword guard has also come to the Wind and Fire Desert. I wonder if Brother Chu has seen him?" "Nope." Chu Mu lightly replied, "I see. If Brother Chu has seen him, please let me know." Situ Feng nodded and gave Chu Mu a deep look before turning around and leaving. His perfect True Realm sword guard stared at Chu Mu with a trace of killing intent in his eyes. "Brother Chu, there are some things that are best kept between you and me. Otherwise, we'll have to shed all pretense of cordiality. Once everyone knows, that would be a huge problem." Situ Feng's voice suddenly entered Chu Mu's ears. Chu Mu was sure that Situ Feng and his sword guard were suspecting him, but he wasn't sure. After all, they felt that he had just broken through to the True Realm. No matter how strong he was, it was impossible for him to kill him. As for what Situ Feng had said, Chu Mu could also understand the meaning behind it. It was just like the sword guard who had died under the moon's slaying sword. They wanted to threaten Chu Mu with the secret of how Chu Mu had appeared outside when he was only at the 9th transformation realm and used a short year to break through to the True Realm. Although Situ Feng had not mentioned any conditions, Chu Mu knew that he would not let go of this opportunity. However, the question was, would Chu Mu give him this opportunity? "Let's go into the ancient sword tomb," someone said. Immediately, someone took the lead and turned into a ray of light, rushing into the dark entrance and disappearing as if he had been swallowed. I remember now. Chu Mu is the sword hero who is ranked first on the Heavenly Sword Hero list. Suddenly, a swordsman shouted, "It's him!" Impossible. It hasn't even been a year and a half. How could he have broken through to the True Realm so quickly? Amidst the discussions, Chu Mu had already entered the ancient sword tomb and arrived at the first floor. Although the ancient sword tomb was called a tomb, it was extremely large. At a glance, one could not see the end of it. Countless gray gases floated around like fog, emitting the smell of decay and death, making one feel a little depressed. Countless broken swords mixed with gray skeletons were scattered around, forming the ground of the first floor of the ancient sword tomb. There were also countless tombstones standing there, all of them crooked like a mass grave. This place was like a graveyard for the dead. The entrance of Chu Mu and the rest had disturbed the sleeping dead. All around them, soft whimpering sounds could be heard. It was faintly discernible, intermittent, like the whispers of ghosts. This sound made one's hair stand on end, as if countless evil spirits were awakening. Strange laughter could be heard, and all sorts of laughter and screams could be heard from the tombstones, making one's scalp go numb. The light in the surroundings seemed to have dimmed. Kacha, 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 the sounds of bones rubbing against each other could be heard. Vaguely, the gray skeletons on the ground seemed to be moving. "Let's go," someone shouted and immediately flew forward. They were all True Realm swordsmen. Although there were many treasures on the first floor of the ancient sword tomb, they were not attractive to True Realm swordsmen. At least on the second floor they would be tempted. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chijian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 519. Another royal grade sword. Chu Mu shook his head helplessly as he stored the jet-black longsword that looked like it was made of some kind of bone into his spatial bracelet. Although the value of a king-grade sword wasn't low, the current him had the ability to create a king-grade sword himself. He could even create a top-tier king-grade sword. Therefore, no matter how many king-grade swords there were, Chu Mu wouldn't be moved. This was the third level of the ancient sword tomb. The gray aura floating in the air was even denser. The smell of death was also 10 times stronger than the first level. Here, Chu Mu realized that his mental power was obviously suppressed. He could only release it to a range of 10 meters. Even with his powerful mental power, he was suppressed to this extent, let alone the other primary realm swordsmen. They could only release their mental power to a range of 5 to 6 meters. Most of the primary realm swordsmen could not release their mental power at all. If there was any danger, they would not be able to sense it in advance like before. The first level of the ancient sword tomb was extremely large. Chu Mu and the other primary realm swordsmen had to fly for more than 6 hours before reaching the end. They killed the skeleton general and a group of powerful skeleton swordsmen guarding the entrance to the second level and entered the second level. The second level was more than twice the size of the first level. Moreover, the pressure on the second level was even greater. The flying speed of the primary realm swordsmen had decreased by more than half. Just like that, the primary realm swordsmen had to fly for more than 30 hours before reaching the end of the second level. They fought with the skeleton commanders and skeleton generals guarding the entrance to the third level and killed them all before entering the third level. The third level was more than twice the size of the second level. Moreover, the pressure here was even greater. The primary realm swordsmen could no longer fly and could only walk. Close to 1,000 primary realm swordsmen entered the third level of the ancient sword tomb and spread out. It was like a small boat entering the ocean. It was difficult to see anyone else. It was difficult to sense the flow of time here. Therefore, Chu Mu did not know how long he had been here. He only vaguely felt that it was not short. Perhaps it had been more than a day. The third level of the ancient sword tomb was indeed a treasure trove. As long as one had the heart, they would be able to find royal-grade swords or related ores and metals. However, to the third level, these royal-grade swords were the most ordinary items. Most of them were left behind by the swordsmen who had died in the ancient sword tomb. Actually, the ancient sword tomb has a fourth floor. The Azura sword of Gojosian's voice sounded in his ears, startling Chu Mu. The fourth floor? Chu Mu repeated. That's right. This is a secret that very few people know about. Back then, I entered the fourth level purely by coincidence. The Azura sword of Gojosian said, other than me, there were others who entered the fourth floor. Perhaps some of the swordsmen who entered this place this time also know of the existence of the fourth floor. What's the difference between the fourth floor and the third floor? Chu Mu could not help but ask curiously. The fourth floor is not as big as the third floor. It can't even compare to the first floor. However, the pressure on the fourth floor is even greater. You will have to experience this yourself. The Azura sword of Gojosian said. What he meant was that he was going to tell Chu Mu how to enter the fourth floor. With your current strength, you can barely enter the fourth floor. Now, go forward until I tell you to stop. The Azura sword of Gojosian instructed. Okay. Chu Mu nodded and strode forward. The fourth floor was extremely attractive to him. In the Tianfeng region, the various records of the ancient sword tomb only mentioned 3 floors. Therefore, most swordsmen believed that the ancient sword tomb only had 3 floors. If the Azura sword of Gojosian did not point it out, Chu Mu would naturally think so too. The fourth floor, although the Azura sword of Gojosian did not explain clearly what was on the fourth floor, it was enough to attract Chu Mu's attention. The Heavenly Dipper Soul condensation technique is what I obtained from the fourth floor. The Azura sword of Gojosian suddenly said, causing Chu Mu's eyes to light up. The Heavenly Dipper Soul condensation technique was a secret technique used by ancient swordsmen. To think that it was obtained from the fourth floor of the ancient sword tomb. This was completely out of Chu Mu's expectations. Then the ancient sword tomb has existed since the ancient times? Chu Mu asked. Yes, but as for how it appeared, I'm not sure. Maybe only some ancient existences would know. The Azura sword of Gojoseon said, "Those who can enter the fourth floor as long as they don't die will be able to obtain a fortuitous encounter." Chumu nodded and walked even faster. He was almost running. On the fiery wind desert, there were people coming from afar. When they arrived at the dark entrance of the ancient sword tomb, they did not stop and directly entered. Among these people, there were many original realm swordsmen and some Chi high swordsmen. The original realm swordsmen flew past the first floor at an extremely fast speed and entered the second floor. After that, some of the weaker original realm swordsmen stayed on the second floor to look for their fortuitous encounter. A few of the stronger original realm swordsmen entered the third floor. However, the ancient sword tomb was huge. Even if they could fly, it would take them at least 2 days to fly from one side to the other. Not to mention that they could only run in this situation where they could not fly. "Brother Chu, why don't you join our team? We can take care of each other." "Brother Chu, this place is filled with danger. If you are not careful, you could die. Why don't you join our team and seek fortuitous encounters together?" On the way, Chumu met 2 teams. They knew of Chumu's identity and invited him. However, Chumu rejected them. He was now heading towards the 4th floor. "Brother Chu, we are really fated." 2 figures walked towards him. One of them smiled and said to Chumu. It was Situfeng and his sword guard. Chumu stopped and did not say anything. His expression was calm. "As long as Brother Chu is willing to work for me, I will treat you like my own Brother Chu. Once I become the young master of the Situ family, Brother Chu will be able to enjoy all the resources of the family and increase your strength even faster." Situfeng said straightforwardly. Before he was threatening and now he was tempting. His goal was obvious. He wanted to use the so-called secret to threaten Chumu and make Chumu submit and work for him. If Chumu submitted, then his sword heart would be damaged. In the future, he might be able to cultivate to sword saint or even become a sword of Gojoseon. However, he would be a weak sword of Gojoseon. As for creating his own sword Dao, that would be even more impossible. Before that, I asked someone a question. Chumu let out a breath and said indifferently, "Between facing trouble that has yet to come and submitting to threats, which one would I choose? What do you guys think? If you are smart, then you should choose to submit." Situ Feng's expression changed at first, then he sneered. The sword guard beside him glared at Chumu. An extremely sharp killing intent burst out, as if it wanted to pierce through Chumu. "Senior, I will have to trouble you this time." Chumu transmitted his voice. "With your current strength, it will indeed be difficult to deal with the 2 of them." The Shura sword of Gojoseon replied, "Once one of them escapes and the news spreads, it will also be troublesome for you." As soon as the Shura sword of Gojoseon finished speaking, the crimson sword of Gojoseon in front of Chumu's chest flew up by itself, releasing a red light. Then the crimson sword rapidly expanded, and the Shura sword of Gojoseon's spirit body appeared once again. After more than a year of silent cultivation, the Shura sword of Gojoseon's spirit body had become more solid than before. Situfeng and the complete Origin Realm swordsmen widened their eyes. Their faces were filled with disbelief. The scene in front of them was beyond their imagination. "Now, I will send you down to accompany him," Chumu said. The Shura sword of Gojoseon held the Shura sword in his hand and swung it out without the slightest trace of smoke or fire. "Wait." Situfeng was almost scared out of his wits as he hurriedly yelled. The middle-aged sword guard directly pulled out his sword. With a roar, his body flashed and appeared in front of Situfeng. All of his power surged out and converged into the sword. It was incomparably bright. This was the strongest sword he had ever used in his life. However, they did not even have the strength of a sword saint. Under the ancient Shura sword of Gojoseon, they were extremely weak. Even if the Shura sword of Gojoseon was only left with its spirit body, it would still be able to kill a sword saint. a red arc of light seemed to come from the horizon, instantly cutting off the sword guard's ultimate attack. In a thousandth of a second, it passed through the middle-aged sword guard's body, but was blocked by a ray of light released from Situ Feng's body. With a cracking sound, the light on Situ Feng's body shattered like an eggshell, and the scarlet arc of light dissipated at the same time. Situ Feng immediately reacted. His sword yuan surged, and a layer of blood light rolled out from his body, turning into a blood-red flame that burned fiercely, emitting an incomparably terrifying aura. Then, with a boom, Situ Feng shot up into the sky, turning around to escape. Moon beheading. Chu Mu roared as the desolate sky sword was unsheathed. A 10-meter-long dark golden crescent moon broke through the sky and caught up to Situ Feng at an even faster speed. With a boom, Situ Feng spat out a mouthful of blood. Countless blood-red flames splashed out, but his speed suddenly increased. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared from Chu Mu and the Shura sword of Gojosian's sight. Chu Mu's face was not looking good. He did not expect Situ Feng to escape, even with the help of the Shura sword of Gojosian. He had a protective treasure on him that allowed him to block my sword. Then he used a secret technique that burned his blood and sword yuan in exchange for astonishing speed. The Shura sword of Gojosian calmly said, "The pressure here made my divine soul body feel uncomfortable, so my reaction was a bit slow. That's why I couldn't keep him here. However, you don't need to worry. After using this blood escape secret technique, the side effects are extremely great. After being hit by your sword, once the secret technique was stopped, even if he didn't die, he would still be heavily injured and unconscious. In a place like the ancient sword tomb, it is impossible for him to survive." Chu Mu's expression returned to normal, but his heart was filled with shock. The ancient sword tomb was truly strange. It could even suppress the Shura sword of Gojosian's divine soul body, causing his reaction to be a bit slower and allowing Situ Feng to escape. However, just as the Shura sword of Gojosian had said after using the blood escape secret technique and then being hit by his moon beheading, even if Situ Feng did not die, he would not be far from death. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 520. With a bang, the flame-like blood-red light fell from the sky like a meteor, heavily smashing into a gray tombstone. His entire body was bent from the back, and it was obvious that his spine was completely broken. Blood dripped onto the tombstone. Shortly after, a strange gray light appeared on the tombstone. Then, gray chi emerged from the tombstone and entered Situ Feng's body. "Kacha! Kacha! 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 Kacha!" Situ Feng's body moved. It was abruptly straightened and strangely stopped on the tombstone. With a swoosh, his body rushed up and landed next to the tombstone. His eyes were a strange gray color, and his originally handsome face had gray aura flowing around it. It was incomparably malevolent and frightening. His body emitted bursts of kacha-kacha, explosive sounds. His body was twitching, gradually growing taller and shorter, and finally returning to its original form. The gray in his eyes also turned black. "How many years has it been? I'm finally alive again." Situ Feng's mouth opened slightly, and an obscure voice sounded. His body flashed, and he turned into a stream of light, flying away. His speed was shocking. "The 4th floor, this time I must enter." "Stop!" The Azura sword of Gojosian suddenly said. Chu Mu stopped abruptly. There were tombstones all around. "Look at the tombstones around you. What's different about them?" The Azura sword of Gojosian said. Chu Mu looked at them one by one, and his brows slightly wrinkled. "There are not many tombstones around, only 8 in total. Compared to the tombstones he saw before, they were about twice as big. Each tombstone was emitting a shocking aura. It was very rich and each tombstone had a different color. Chu Mu glanced at them. The 8 tombstones were respectively red, light blue, brown, gold, green, cyan, purple, and ice blue. The aura they emitted was not only strong death aura, but also hot, gentle, thick, and sharp vitality, elegant, violent, and icy coldness. Metal, wood, water, fire, earth, wind, ice, and thunder. Chu Mu muttered, "That's right. These 8 tombstones are the 8-fold sword steels. They are the entrances to the 4th level." The Azura sword of Gojoseon said, "Although some swordsmen will feel that the 8-fold sword steel is special, they won't be able to open the entrance to the 4th floor without knowing the method to open it." At this moment, another group of silhouettes flashed over from afar, appearing at the 8-fold sword steel. When they saw Chu Mu, they were first surprised, but when they saw the others, their faces were filled with vigilance. Chu Mu realized that other than himself, there were 31 other swordsmen here. Some of them looked older, in their 30s, while others looked younger than him. The only thing they had in common was that each of them had reached the origin realm. Among them, there were 3 people with the strongest auras. They had all reached the origin, realm Deshang realm. Chu Mu could feel that their auras were extremely sharp and stable. They were far from what the Deshang realm swordsman, Situ Feng, who had died under his moon-slashing sword, could compare with. Geniuses. These people were all true geniuses. Each of them had a powerful force behind them. Among these people, in terms of cultivation, Chu Mu was the lowest. This was because the others were at least at the beginning of the origin realm. Because Chu Mu didn't have enough sword yuan, he could only be considered as half of the beginning. But in terms of strength, it might not be the case. Could it be that all of you are here for these 8 tombstones? One of the 3 people with the highest cultivation, a middle-aged swordsman in a green robe, said in a clear voice after scanning the group, "Nonsense." Another black-robed origin realm swordsman in a Deshang realm sneered, "Very well. It seems like everyone knows some secrets that others don't." The green-robed swordsman didn't get angry at all. Instead, he continued with a smile. "In order to open the 8-fold sword steel, we need to follow a certain order. But after opening it, some powerful enemies will appear. Since everyone wants to enter the 4th floor, we should work together to open the entrance. Only then can we enter the 4th floor smoothly. As for what we can obtain after entering the 4th floor, it all depends on our own luck and ability. During the opening of the steel, everyone has to attack each other. Otherwise, we will become public enemies. Sikong Jian will be the first to not let him go." As he spoke, the green-robed swordsman's eyes shot out an extremely sharp light. In terms of cultivation, he was one of the top 3. Moreover, he belonged to the category of geniuses. His strength was even more shocking and could definitely be ranked in the top 3. His words carried a lot of weight. "I agree." The 3rd origin realm swordsman in a purple robe nodded his head. The black-robed swordsman coldly smiled and didn't object. Since the top 3 swordsmen had the same opinion, the other swordsmen wouldn't object. After all, opening the entrance to the 4th floor was the most important thing. We have a total of 32 people. We can be divided into 8 groups. Each group of 4 will be responsible for 1 steel. Sikong Jian said as he divided the groups, "When the time comes, each group will inject sword energy into the steel and activate it according to the order." Without needing Chu Mu to ask the sword of Gojoseon, Sikong Jian quickly explained the opening method and divided the 8 groups into the 1st group, the 2nd group, the 3rd group to the 8th group. Then, the 8 groups stood according to the order of opening the steel. For people in a group surrounded the steel. The order of opening was metal, wood, wind, water, ice, fire, thunder, earth. Those who didn't know wouldn't be able to open it. Even if they knew, they wouldn't be able to open it without enough manpower. Senior Sword of Gojoseon, if I am the only one, wouldn't I be unable to open the entrance to the 4th floor? Chu Mu asked. "Of course you can." The sword of Gojoseon replied, "You only need to use spirit stones to set up an array and inject energy into the steel according to the order. However, this method will take a bit longer. The first group, inject sword energy," Sikong Jian instructed. He was in the 8th group and could direct the actions of each group. The first group of 4 swordsmen immediately pressed their hands on the steel and injected sword energy. The speed of injecting sword energy was stable. After about 10 breaths of time, Sikong Jian instructed the second group of swordsmen to inject sword energy. In this way, every 10 breaths of time, there would be a group of swordsmen injecting sword energy into the steel. After the 8 steels were injected with sword energy, they began to emit a strong light and a buzzing sound. The aura of death directly gushed out and filled the surroundings, turning into a gray mist. Strange roars followed, like the weeping of ghosts and the roars of fierce beasts. One after another, it was louder than the other, as if it was going to pierce everyone's eardrums. Finally, each steel's light reached its limit, as if they were little suns of different colors. It was so shocking that everyone had to close their eyes. Otherwise, they would feel uncomfortable. Even Chu Mu, with his perfect sword vision, could only squint his eyes into a slit and barely see the changes of the 8-fold sword steel. Tyrannical energy rushed out from the 8 steels, directly pushing back the 32 swordsmen around the steels. They could not help but retreat a few hundred meters. Intense energy fluctuations of different colors collided with each other. The entire 3rd level of the ancient sword tomb trembled violently as if an earthquake was coming and it was about to collapse. What's going on? In other places of the 3rd floor, the swordsmen felt the violent shaking of the tomb, and their faces changed drastically. The 4th floor is about to open. I need to speed up. Situ Feng looked up and could vaguely see 8 different colored lights in the distance. He immediately muttered to himself, and his sword energy erupted, increasing his speed by 3 times. Even if he was in a strange situation, he was still suppressed here and could not fly. Chu Mu squinted his eyes and saw a magical scene. He saw the 8 different colored lights colliding in the center of the 8 steels, and countless sparks flew out. Gradually, a ball of light with 8 different colors appeared in the center of the 8 steels. It began to expand from the size of a fist, and in the blink of an eye, it reached the size of a human head, and it continued to grow. In less than 10 breaths of time, the 8-colored ball of light continued to absorb the 8 different energies and expanded to 2 meters in diameter. Finally, it stabilized, and the 8 steels seemed to have used up all of their energy. Everyone opened their eyes and stared at the ball of light in the center. The 8 colors were constantly circulating and colliding. It's about to open. The 32 swordsmen all stared at the ball of light, and they were all a little nervous. Within the ball of light, the 8 colors were moving at an extremely fast speed. When they collided, they became blurry, as if they had merged into one. Immediately after, a terrifying explosion sounded from within the ball of light. It was like thunder from the heavens, and it spread out. Wave after wave of sound attacked in all directions, and the surrounding gray aura surged like waves. In the center of the ball of light, a gray dot appeared. In the blink of an eye, it expanded and filled the entire ball of light, stretching into a gray door of light. This is the entrance to the 4th floor. It only appeared for a short time. The Shura sort of Gojoseon reminded. The entrance has appeared. Let's go. Sikong Jian shouted. His body moved, and with a whoosh, he rushed towards the gray door of light. The black-robed swordsman and the purple-robed swordsman also moved at the same time. The 3 of them rushed into the gray door of light almost side by side. The remaining 29 swordsmen also reacted quickly. Each of them used their movement techniques and rushed hundreds of meters, rushing towards the gray door of light. In the blink of an eye, the 29 swordsmen, including Chu Mu, all rushed into the gray door of light. From the moment the door of light opened until now, Less than 10 breaths of time had passed. Following that, the gray door of light began to shrink. In just one breath of time, it had shrunk to half its original size. In another breath of time, it would disappear. In the blink of an eye, a figure shot out like a meteor, crossing hundreds of meters and rushing into the gray door of light. The moment he entered, the gray door of light closed and everything returned to normal. The previous scene seemed like an illusion, and some of the swordsmen who had rushed over were confused. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 5:21. Everyone, is there anyone who wants to form a team with me and move together? Once they entered the 4th floor, Sikong Jian immediately said and began to recruit people. Me. Me too. Sikong Jian was very strong and looked very knowledgeable. It was easy for people to trust him. Immediately, several swordsmen expressed their desire to form a team with him. Humph! The black-robed swordsman snorted. His figure flashed, and he left. The purple-robed swordsman did not say a word. He turned into a flash of lightning and left in another direction. Among the remaining swordsmen, they formed teams of 2s and 3s. No need to form a team. The Azura sword of Gojoseon transmitted. Chu Mu declined the others' invitation and moved alone. Many years ago, the Azura sword of Gojoseon had personally come here. At that time, there were also people who came here. Now, it was only the descendants of those people who came here again. Chu Mu brought the Azura sword of Gojoseon's godly soul here. It was completely different. In terms of familiarity with the 4th floor of the ancient sword tomb, the Azura sword of Gojoseon was the most familiar. With the godly soul of the Azura sword of Gojoseon by his side, Chu Mu's advantage was more obvious than the others. Forward, forward, forward without stopping. The 4th floor was like an independent world. It had a gray sky and gray clouds that were condensed like lead blocks. It was as if they were going to fall and crush the ground, making people feel even more oppressed. The ground was also gray. It wasn't like the first level where there were skeletons everywhere, nor were there tombstones everywhere. However, there was a strange aura emitting from it, as if there were illusions everywhere. It was easy to get lost in it. Chu Mu was like a lone traveler walking on this strange ground. The gray fog was very thick and the visibility was very low. At this time, Chu Mu was moving in the direction that the Azura sword of Gojoseon said. Unlike the other swordsmen who entered here, Chu Mu had a clear goal. Without a clear goal, one could only rely on luck. With a clear goal, the final harvest would definitely be better. After a period of time, Chu Mu saw a tombstone. Behind the tombstone was a tomb standing alone in the vast land. This should be an intermediate tomb. You can give it a try and see if you can obtain the fortune within, the Azura sword of Gojoseon said. According to the Azura sword of Gojoseon, there were some tombs in the 4th level of the ancient sword tomb. They were different from the tombstones in the first 3 levels. Each tomb represented an opportunity. The tombs here were also divided into low-level, mid-level, and high-level tombs. Above high-level tombs were king-level tombs, but king-level tombs were extremely rare. There weren't even many high-level tombs. Moreover, it was difficult to tell the level of the tomb just from its appearance. The Azura sword of Gojoseon could tell, because he knew this place better than others, and also because of his powerful divine sense. Middle-level tomb. Chu Mu's figure flashed and appeared in front of the tombstone that seemed to be both black and gray. According to the Azura sword of Gojoseon's instructions, he pressed his palm on the tombstone and inserted sky, desolation, sword energy. In his other hand, Chu Mu held a mid-level sky desolation stone and absorbed the pure desolation chi within it to recover his depleted sword energy. After a while, Chu Mu raised his palm and saw the tombstone emit bursts of light. The tomb behind the tombstone automatically separated and something flew out and floated in the air. Not bad, there really is something. Although the Azura sword of Gojoseon didn't appear, he could clearly feel everything that was happening outside. Chu Mu extended his hand and grabbed the ball of light that was burning like a flame. When it landed in his hand, it turned into a piece of fiery red jade. From time to time, flames would jump out from it. There is some information recorded in this jade. It could be a cultivation technique or comprehension. You can use your mental power to check it out. The Azura sword of Gojoseon said. Chu Mu's mind moved, and his mental strength was released. It wrapped around the fiery red jade in his hand and entered it. Instantly, Chu Mu felt the information inside the jade. So, it's a secret technique. After 10 breaths, Chu Mu finished reading the information in the jade and said to himself, and it's the Burning Heaven triplet secret technique. It's a pity that this secret technique can only amplify the fire element. It's useless to me. In the battle for Providence, the secret technique that Lai Kanyang used seemed to be the first 2 moves of the Burning Heaven triplet. Could it be that he's missing the 3rd move? Although it was useless to him, there was no doubt that the Burning Heaven triplet was a powerful secret technique. Even if it was used by an Origin Realm swordsman, it would still be able to amplify his strength. It was very valuable. Let's continue forward and find the tomb. With this reward, Chu Mu felt very motivated. Chu Mu didn't know how much time had passed before he came across another tomb. According to the Azura sword of Gojoseon, it was a high-level tomb. Unfortunately, it was surrounded by 4 swordsmen. One of them was at the initial stage of the Origin Realm, while the other 3 were at the initial stage of the Origin Realm. This was someone else's opportunity. Under normal circumstances, Chu Mu wouldn't have the intention to snatch it. However, the other party didn't see it that way. When they saw Chu Mu appear, they all stared at Chu Mu with extreme vigilance. They looked like they were ready to attack if Chu Mu made the slightest move. Chu Mu didn't say anything and just walked forward. The 4 swordsmen all let out a sigh of relief. Those who could enter this place were all geniuses. Every one of them had powerful strength. Even if Chu Mu's cultivation wasn't as strong as an initial stage swordsman, no one dared to underestimate him. Once a fight broke out, they might have the confidence to kill him. However, it might cause some unexpected changes. Therefore, it was best not to make a move. Although he missed a high-level tomb, Chu Mu didn't regret it at all. With the guidance of the Azura sword of Gojoseon, he believed that he could also find a high-level tomb. As time passed by, Chu Mu found another tomb. It was a low-level tomb, but nothing appeared after he opened it. Even if it was a high-level tomb, there might not be anything inside. The ancient sword tomb will only be open for half a year. Once half a year is up, it will go back into the fiery wind, desert, and hide itself. No one will be able to find it. The 4th level also belongs to the ancient sword tomb, so it will also be open for half a year. It hasn't even been a month since I entered the ancient sword tomb. I still have time to look for my opportunity. This is a middle-level tomb. There is a 60% chance that there will be something inside. The Azura sword of Gojoseon said. Low-level tombs only had a 30% chance of containing something. Middle-level tombs had a 60% chance, and high-level tombs had an 80% chance. 60% was a pretty good chance. If there was nothing inside, it wouldn't be strange at all. I wonder what I can get this time. Chu Mu thought to himself. With a flash, he appeared in front of the tombstone. While he was moving forward, he was holding a middle-level, desolate stone. He was constantly absorbing the pure, desolate chi within to refine the desolate sword energy. Although it hadn't reached the entry level of the Origin Realm, it was already a lot better than when he had just broken through. Wait! A loud shout was heard. 7 to 8 figures flew over at an extremely fast speed. The one leading them was Sikong Jian. Other than Sikong Jian, there were 7 other swordsmen. 2 of them were at the initial level of the Origin Realm, while the other 5 were at the entry level of the Origin Realm. According to Chu Mu's knowledge, there were a total of 32 swordsmen who had entered this place. Sikong Jian's group alone had 8 of them, which was a quarter of the total. With such strength, Chumu knew very well that he was no match for them. The 8 of them flew over and surrounded the tomb. "You are Chumu, right? I heard that you have great talent. You only used a year and a half to reach the 9th transformation realm. Your future achievements will not be low, provided that you don't die prematurely," Sikong Jian said to Chumu with a smile. His tone was very gentle. "I hope that we can become friends, because when it comes to dealing with enemies, I usually eliminate them completely." Chumu slightly frowned, but didn't say anything. "We have only seen a few tombs ever since we entered this place. This is the first one we have seen. Let's be friends and let us have this tomb. How about that?" Sikong Jian said with a smile. His eyes stared straight at Chumu. There was a trace of sharpness in his eyes, which gave Chumu a lot of pressure. These days, the so-called treasures belong to the virtuous. If you are strong enough, you are virtuous. One of the swordsmen at the initial level of the origin realm said in a low voice. Even though he was unwilling, Chumu could only back off. Right now, he was still no match for Sikong Jian. Not to mention, there were still 7 other swordsmen. Even if he let the Azura sword of Gojoseon attack, it would still be difficult to kill all of them, because on the 4th floor of the ancient sword tomb, the Azura sword of Gojoseon's suppression was even more obvious. His reaction was slower, and every time he attacked, it would consume more of his soul energy. If he used the meteor sword energy, he might be able to do it. However, Chumu felt that it was not worth it to use the meteor sword energy for a middle-grade tomb that only had a 60% chance of containing something. Without saying a word, Chumu only glanced at the 8 swordsmen, as if he wanted to remember their faces. Then he quickly backed off. Sikong Jian and the others looked at Chumu, who was quickly backing off, and let out a light laugh. They did not think much of it. They were all geniuses, and geniuses were all arrogant. They would not easily admit that they were inferior to others. Even if Chumu's future was limitless, what about them? Could it be limited? One had to know that each of them had outstanding talent, and they had the support of a powerful force behind them. They could obtain all kinds of resources to aid their cultivation. Their future achievements would definitely not be low. As for Sikong Jian, he did not put Chumu in his eyes at all. When Chumu grew up, he believed that he would have gone even further. "Do you feel unreconciled?" the Azura sword of Gojoseon asked. "There is nothing to be unreconciled about. Everything is because I am not strong enough," Chumu replied calmly. His heart was calm. Anger? Unreconciled? None of that mattered. This only made him realize the importance of strength. If he had the cultivation of Deshang in the origin realm, he would definitely not be afraid of the 8 swordsmen. He would definitely have the ability to compete with them. It is good that you have such understanding. Everything is based on strength. The so-called virtuous person in front of a powerful swordsman is only a layer of strength. The Azura sword of Gojoseon said, "You are still very young. Your talent is above theirs. It is only a matter of time before you surpass them. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation." Chapter 5:22. The 4th floor of the ancient sword tomb seemed to be a world of its own. However, the sky remained the same, as if it had been frozen. Chumu walked across the vast land, guided by the Shura sword of Gojoseon. Whenever he encountered a tomb, he would open it. Unfortunately, there weren't many tombs in the 4th level of the ancient sword tomb. Most of them were low-level tombs with nothing in them. Perhaps there had been something there a long time ago, but it had been taken away by someone, leaving behind an empty tomb. After being stimulated by Sikong Jian and the others, Chumu desired to become stronger. However, increasing one's strength was not something that could be done overnight. He also understood this point. Therefore, he was not in a rush to increase his strength. Instead, he let nature take its course. "Stop!" The Shura sword of Gojoseon's voice sounded again, carrying a rare seriousness. Move 100 meters to the left. The Shura sword of Gojoseon's voice sounded again, on the 4th floor of the ancient sword tomb. The deeper one went, the thicker the gray fog became. Visibility was greatly reduced. With Chumu's eyesight, he could only see about 50 meters. Only the Shura sword of Gojoseon's divine sense could cover 100 meters and sense things ahead of time. Following the Shura sword of Gojoseon's instructions, Chumu quickly turned left. After walking 100 meters forward, he was suddenly stunned. In front of him was a huge tomb. The tombstone of this tomb was at least 10 meters tall. The tomb behind the tombstone was also 10 meters tall. Compared to the previous tombs, this tomb was like the tomb of a giant. An ancient and vicissitude aura surrounded the huge tomb. The gray fog flowed around the tomb, emitting a thick smell of death. Standing in front of this huge ancient tomb, Chumu felt that he could not breathe. It was extremely stifling. The tombstone in front of him seemed to be constantly growing, like a towering mountain. This is a king-class tomb. The Shura sword of Gojoseon's voice rang out. The seriousness and joy in his voice startled Chumu. Many years ago, when I entered this place, I had never encountered a king-class grave. I didn't expect your luck to be so good. A king-class grave. Chumu stared at the 10-meter-tall black tombstone with wide eyes. According to the Azura sword of Gojoseon, there was a 100% chance that a king-level tomb would contain a treasure. It was just that they didn't know what kind of treasure it was. "Open it," the Azura sword of Gojoseon said, his voice filled with undisguised excitement. Chumu took a step forward and pressed his palm on the black tombstone. He felt that the tombstone was extremely cold, as if it was going to freeze his blood. He immediately channeled his sword energy and dispelled the coldness. Then he injected the sky wasteland sword energy, which had reached the entry level, into the huge tombstone. After 3 breaths of time, the tombstone emitted a buzzing sound. A weak black light appeared on the surface of the tombstone, faintly discernible. In the next breath, the tomb behind the tombstone began to shake. It rumbled like the mountains were collapsing. A crack slowly opened at the top of the tomb, and an extremely terrifying death aura spread out. It hit Chumu in the face, and he couldn't help but take a few steps back. After another breath, Chumu felt goosebumps all over his body. His pores were about to explode. A cold current flowed from the soles of his feet along his spine to his head. A strong sense of danger made him quickly back away from the tombstone. "Be careful!" The Azura sword of Gojoseon's voice sounded again. It was full of seriousness. "Kacha, kacha, kacha," sounds came from the sky. It was like the sound of bones rubbing against each other. It made Chumu's hair stand on end. Then, from the crack in the tomb, an arm suddenly stretched out. It grabbed the edge of the tomb and tried to pull itself out. It was a white bone arm that was even thicker than Chumu's waist. It flickered with a sparkling luster, and an incomparably powerful aura was unceasingly being emitted from the arm, creating a whirlwind that whistled through the air. "There is a tomb guard. It seems that the treasures in this king-level tomb are no small matter," the Azura sword of Gojoseon said. Following that, a huge skull emerged from the crack in the tomb. It had the appearance of a human skull, but it was much larger. Within its pitch-black eye sockets, a faint blue willow, the wisp burned. As it moved, 2 streaks of bright light shot out like meteors. "Kill it," the Azura sword of Gojoseon quickly shouted. There was a hint of anxiety in his voice. He pulled out his sword, and the dark gold crescent moon broke through the sky. In an instant, it bombarded the skull that had just reached out its second arm. There was a kacha sound, and the dark gold crescent moon shattered. The skull, however, was unharmed. Chumu was horrified. He had used all of his strength in that attack, and its power was unparalleled. Yet, it had not been able to hurt the skull. It had not even caused the slightest bit of damage. How was this possible? With a roar, a visible sound wave came from the skull's mouth. It turned into a storm and shook Chumu. It bombarded him, and he was forced to retreat. His blood was boiling. The two arms of the skull supported the two sides of the tomb. With a sudden burst of strength, its body rushed out of the crack in the tomb, leaving the lower half of its body in the tomb. "Senior, this tomb guard is too strong," Chumu said. "I know. This tomb guard strength should be equivalent to a powerful sword venerable level swordsman. With your current strength, you are no match for it. It only needs one strike to kill you," the Azura sword of Gojoseon said solemnly. "Moreover, once the tomb guard appears, no matter where you run, as long as you are still in the 4th level of the ancient sword tomb, it will continue to pursue you. It will only return to the tomb after killing you, or you can only obtain the treasures in the tomb if you kill it." Chumu's face changed. This was equivalent to a dead end. It was either you die or I die. Even if I appear, it won't be easy to kill it, the Azura sword of Gojoseon said. "Once I use most of my strength to kill it, I will definitely fall into a deep sleep to recover the strength of my soul. It seems that I have to use the meteor sword essence," Chumu said secretly. Although there was only one meteor sword essence, and it was very precious, he did not hesitate to use it. At this time, the skeleton guardian had already stepped out of the tomb with one of its thick legs. The other leg was about to fall out of the tomb's crack. After that, it would be time for it to attack. With a thought, the terrifying meteor sword essence in the vast spiritual world suddenly rushed out from between his eyebrows. It turned into a dazzling stream of light and flew towards the skeleton guardian like a falling meteor. In an instant, the surroundings were overshadowed. Only the meteor sword essence emitted a dazzling brilliance, breaking the world apart. The skeleton guardian's second leg fell. With a rumble, the earth shook. Its hand reached behind its back and pulled out a huge white-boned sword that was as big as a door. With a whistling sound, the huge white-boned sword was raised high and slashed forward. It was as if it wanted to split the heaven and earth in front of it. A thick, grayish-white aura condensed into a terrifying sword of death and slashed towards the meteor sword essence. In an instant, the whole world seemed to have turned into nothingness. There was no sound. A strange scene appeared. All the energy rushed towards the skeleton guardian. It was as if the power released by the meteor sword essence had reflected all the energy. Then the meteor sword essence burst out with 10 times the brilliance. It defeated the white-boned sword and blasted towards the skeleton guardian's head in an invincible manner. The meteor sword essence's power was unparalleled. The powerful skeleton guardian could not resist at all. Suddenly, the meteor sword essence hit its forehead and penetrated through the back of its head in an instant. In an instant, the blue flame in the skeleton guardian's eye sockets was extinguished. It meant that its soul flame was extinguished under the power of the meteor sword essence. The huge skeleton guardian didn't even have the time to display its formidable strength before it died under the meteor sword essence. Its thick and sturdy white bones fell down one after another. In the blink of an eye, a small hill of white bones was piled up next to the grave. The meteor sword essence drew a beautiful arc in the air and flew towards Chumu. In the blink of an eye, it entered Chumu's spiritual world. Chumu checked and found that the meteor sword essence had shrunk by half. In other words, killing this skeleton guardian had consumed half of the meteor sword essence's power. I hope the treasures in this level grave are good. Chumu smiled bitterly. The meteor sword essence was his trump card. Now that half of it had been used, if the treasures in the grave were not good enough, it would be a waste. Don't worry. The treasures will not disappoint you. The Shura sword of Gojoseon was very confident. Chumu's body flashed, and he appeared next to the grave. At the same time, a ball of light rose from the cracked grave like a rising sun. A strong fluctuation spread out. Chumu reached out and grabbed the ball of light. The ball of light flew over and landed in Chu Mu's hand. It was a black jade pendant in the shape of a water droplet. Is this another treasure that records skills? Chu Mu thought to himself. With a move of his mind, his mental strength was immediately released. It wrapped around the droplet-shaped black jade pendant and penetrated into it. In the next moment, Chu Mu felt the information inside the jade pendant explode like a flood. Chu Mu's spiritual power flowed into Chu Mu's mind. He recorded and read the information one by one. The amount of information was huge, and it took a full 15 minutes for it to finish. Chu Mu's eyes were full of surprise. He was shocked by the skills recorded in the black jade pendant. The heaven-seizing technique. It sounded extraordinary, and the content was even more extraordinary. This technique was very strange because it could not increase one's cultivation, sword power, or soul strength. It could be said that the heaven-seizing technique did not increase the swordsman's strength at all. However, its role was incomparable, immeasurable, and irreplaceable. It could increase one's cultivation talent. Talent determined one's achievements. This was the most widely spread saying in the ancient sword continent. It was also the truth. The level of talent determined the future achievements. There were occasional exceptions that could be surpassed, but it was only by one level. It was absolutely impossible to continue. Everyone's cultivation talent wasn't necessarily the same, but one's cultivation talent could be improved. However, to improve one's cultivation talent, the difficulty was truly too high. Almost the majority of people were unable to do it. So Chu Mu's body faintly trembled due to excitement. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 5:23. A swordsman's talent could be categorized into several categories: cultivation talent, battle talent, comprehension talent, and so on. A person with a high cultivation talent might not necessarily be powerful, but any swordsman who wanted to go further on this path would need cultivation talent. Since ancient times, there had been countless talented swordsmen who had terrifying comprehension and battle talent. They could easily challenge those of a higher level, but in the end, they were stuck at a certain level due to their lack of cultivation talent. They were unable to break through for the rest of their lives and could only regretfully turn into dust. One had to admit that cultivation talent was like a natural chasm that hindered the future of many talented swordsmen. In the central main sword domain, most of the swordsmen had a level 6 cultivation talent. In other words, their limit was the peak of the complete astral realm. Occasionally, there would be one or two lucky swordsmen who broke through to the astral realm due to some fortuitous encounter. However, they could not continue to improve. Therefore, in the central main sword domain, most of the swordsmen had the strength of a sword venerable. After all, the lifespan of an astral realm swordsman was as long as 1,000 years. Because Chu Mu had consumed the Qinglan divine fruit and the Tianhuang fruit, his cultivation talent had increased to level 6. In other words, his limit was the astral realm. As of now, Chu Mu had already cultivated to the beginning of the astral realm. Although it would still take a long time to reach the peak of the complete astral realm, according to his own estimation, it would not be too long. When the time came, he would have to worry about how to break through. Obtaining the heaven-seizing technique was equivalent to obtaining a solution to his problem. The heaven-seizing technique was different from the Tianhuang fruit. The Tianhuang fruit could directly increase one's cultivation after consumption. However, it could only increase one level at most. Moreover, the Tianhuang fruit was too rare and difficult to obtain. The heaven-seizing technique was different. Although it could not be increased in a short period of time, as long as one cultivated, there would be a qualitative change. Moreover, it could be increased continuously. 2 ways. Chu Mu's gaze turned deep. There were 2 ways to cultivate the heaven-seizing grand technique. One was a natural cultivation method. It was stable and wouldn't cause any side effects. However, it would take a long time. It would usually take 10 to 20 years or even longer. The other method was a bit evil, and that was to steal the cultivation talent of other swordsmen and absorb their cultivation talent. Of course, one could only absorb a very small portion of it, but as long as there was enough of it, one could still improve in a short period of time. Moreover, there were no side effects. The only requirement was that one had to have a powerful soul and will. It seems like there are no side effects, but in fact, when you experience the thrill of the improvement of your talent, it's easy to sink into it and find it hard to extricate yourself. The Asura sort of Gojosian said, once you are unable to extricate yourself, you will eventually lose yourself. Imagine that kind of outcome. After listening to the Asura sword of Gojosian's explanation, Chumu instantly understood the pros and cons. No wonder the cultivation method required a powerful soul and will. Only with a powerful soul and will would one have powerful self-control. Only then would it be easy to lose yourself and sink into it. In the end, one would be consigned to eternal damnation. You should be very clear about the consequences. Therefore, as for how you should cultivate, you should know in your heart. I won't say much. The Asura sort of Gojosian said. Chumu nodded. He indeed had his own ideas. Putting the droplet-shaped black jade pendant into his spatial wristband, Chumu continued to advance. Sikongjian, I found this tomb first. Now, take your people and scram. The middle-aged, black-robed swordsman's face was cold, like a poisonous snake in the dark. His gloomy eyes flashed with a frightening cold light. His gaze swept over and landed on Sikongjian's face. That kind of tone was like the extreme north wind. Shangyang, treasures have always belonged to the virtuous. From the current situation, I am the virtuous one. Sikongjian was not angry at all. Instead, he faintly smiled and said, Shangyang was alone, while Sikongjian's side had a total of 8 people. Just Sikongjian's strength alone was not lower than Shangyang's. Adding the other 7, they were enough to kill Shangyang. Well said. Treasures have always belonged to the virtuous one, but I believe that I am the virtuous one. Another voice sounded. The middle-aged, purple-robed swordsman suddenly appeared. He was also alone. The 3 sides formed a tripartite formation. Zhou Xian, you also want to join in the fun? You should know that there are some things that should not be done. That would be fatal. Sikongjian's face slightly changed. His eyes narrowed, emitting a cold light. His tone carried a hint of threat. I, Zhou Xian, agree with what you said. However, the fun right now is not enough to kill me. Zhou Xian's face was full of confidence. The atmosphere suddenly became tense. A desolate killing intent spread out, filling the surroundings, forming a whistling sound like a storm. Suddenly, a human figure appeared, as if breaking this desolate atmosphere, causing all of their attention to shift. 3 waves of violent killing intent rushed out, but the approaching figure did not move at all. It was as if he had crawled out from hell. The dark figure gave people an incomparably gloomy and oppressive feeling, a strange aura that caused people to frown deeply spread out. I'll give you 2 choices, scram or die. A low and oppressive voice sounded, but it was also like the roar of a fierce beast. It caused Sikongjian and the others' faces to change drastically. The one who will die is you. Shangyang's temper was the worst. He furiously said and drew his sword. The sword light was pitch black, as if it could devour all light. It sliced through the air, instantly aiming for the incoming figure. Sikongjian and Zhou Xian saw Shangyang make his move and release their palms. They were very clear that there were a total of 32 people who had entered the 4th floor, and the 3 of them were the strongest. Hence, since Shangyang made his move, that person would die without a doubt. The black sword light shot through the air, but the figure seemed to flicker, and the black sword light disappeared. No, it didn't disappear. It appeared behind the figure and flew away. It was as if the black sword light had pierced through the figure, as if the figure was an illusion. Xiangyang was stunned. Sikong Jian and Zhou Xian were also stunned. Interesting. Xiangyang's lips curled up in a sinister smile. The long and narrow black sword in his hand slashed out. In an instant, a dense black sword light formed a sword net enveloping the figure. Insignificant skill. An obscure and hoarse voice sounded out. The black sword net instantly shattered, and the silhouette suddenly accelerated, appearing in front of Xiangyang like a ghost. It was so fast that Xiangyang couldn't see it clearly. Xiangyang's eyes widened. He only saw a cold light magnifying in front of him, as if it came from the void. That killing intent caused his entire body to tremble. Scram! Xiangyang roared. Sword qi erupted from his body. His sword was like a shooting star, and his footsteps staggered as he rapidly retreated. The silhouette was like a maggot, twisting and turning, evading Xiangyang's sword strike. The sword strike changed into a horizontal sweep. Xiangyang was sent flying, spitting out a mouthful of blood. He was injured in a single exchange. Sikong Jian and Zhou Xian's eyes widened, their faces filled with astonishment. Quick, attack! Xiangyang landed on the ground and shouted. His voice was filled with fear. This person's strength was too strong. Sikong Jian and Zhou Xian reacted quickly, unsheathing their swords. The 7 swordsmen in Sikong Jian's group also unsheathed their swords, each displaying their sword skills to kill. All of a sudden, the area within 10 meters was filled with a terrifying energy. The silhouette within it was about to be torn apart. Suddenly, the silhouette exploded, turning into countless streaks of light that shot out in all directions. A strange scene occurred. The silhouette appeared beside a beginning origin realm swordsman. Sword light shone, and a head flew high into the air. Instant kill. Kill him. One of the origin realm swordsmen's eyes turned red as he let out a roar. His sword light danced in the air like a meat grinder, leaving no room for escape. Xiangyang took out a pill and swallowed it. His body flashed as he attacked again. 3 Origin Realm Swordsmen Deshang and 6 beginning Origin Realm Swordsmen teamed up to deal with the mysterious silhouette. Until now, they still hadn't seen the silhouette's true face. 9 genius swordsmen besieged a mysterious person, yet they were unable to take him down. Amidst the flurry of sword lights, another 2 weaker Origin Realm swordsmen were killed by him. This was equivalent to slapping Xiangyang, Sikong Jian, and Zhou Xian in the face, causing them to feel a stinging pain. Purple thunder formless. Zhou Xian yelled as countless purple thunderbolts appeared all over his body. He used a secret art, causing his strength to skyrocket. Xiangyang and Sikong Jian didn't care about anything else as they used their secret arts to increase their strength. The other swordsmen also used their secret arts, suppressing the mysterious silhouette. With a slash, the mysterious silhouette was sent flying. He spat out a mouthful of blood as he crashed into the tombstone. The mysterious silhouette pressed his palm on the tombstone. It was a huge tombstone that was more than 10 meters tall. He injected his sword yuan into the tombstone. All of a sudden, the tombstone shone brightly, and the tomb behind it began to crack open. Sikong Jian and the other 2 were startled at first, then became furious. This mysterious silhouette dared to do such a thing right under their noses. He was trying to take away the treasures in the tomb. He was looking down on them. Die. With a roar, they used their strongest sword skills. Rumbling shockwaves, hurricanes, heavenly thunder, and darkness descended, destroying everything in its path. The mysterious silhouette couldn't dodge in time and was hit by the 3 attacks. He was instantly sent flying. However, his body went around the tombstone and grabbed the light that rushed out of the tomb. He immediately ran away. One had to admit that this person was willing to give up his life for the treasures. Damn it! Chase! Sikong Jian's face turned pale. Without any hesitation, he chased after the mysterious silhouette. Zhou Xian and Shan Yang's faces were also extremely gloomy. They didn't expect that the mysterious silhouette would rather take their sword skills than take away the treasures in the tomb. He must be heavily injured right now. He can't run far. Chase! Shan Yang said gloomily as he immediately chased after the mysterious silhouette. Zhou Xian didn't say anything, but he also quickly moved and chased after the mysterious silhouette. The remaining 4 swordsmen looked at each other, then followed suit. In the blink of an eye, there was only a huge tomb left, standing alone on the vast land. It was a desolate scene. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qijian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 524. Another middle-grade grave. Chu Mu muttered to himself as he grabbed the ball of light above the grave. As the ball of light dissipated, a thin book appeared in Chu Mu's hand. Immemorial Scripture. It was a very common name, but after Chu Mu flipped it open, he realized that it was a cultivation method for sword energy. Moreover, it was a middle-grade heaven-level cultivation method. Under normal circumstances, an Origin Realm swordsman would cultivate a top-grade earth-level cultivation method. There were few who could cultivate a low-grade heaven-level cultivation method. Those who could cultivate a middle-grade heaven-level cultivation method were usually from big factions, such as the geniuses of the top 10 sword sections. Not a bad cultivation method. The sword energy cultivated is more than twice as dense as a normal middle-grade heaven-level cultivation method. It can be considered one of the top middle-grade heaven-level cultivation methods. The Azura sword of Gojoseon commented, "Unfortunately, it's useless to me," Chu Mu said as he stored the immemorial scripture into his spatial bracelet. He cultivated the Sky Baron sword energy. Now that the Sky Baron sword scripture had reached the low-grade heaven level, although it was not as good as the immemorial scripture, the power of the Sky Baron sword energy was not any weaker than the sword energy cultivated from the immemorial scripture. Although it was useless to him, he could keep it. Who knows, it might come in handy in the future. Someone is approaching. The Azura sword of Gojoseon suddenly warned. Chu Mu quickly glanced over and immediately saw a blurry figure rapidly approaching. He instinctively felt a sense of danger as the hair on his neck stood up. Even with Chu Mu's eyesight, he could not see the person's face clearly. It was blurry and ghost-like. The strong sense of danger was like an alarm bell. The sword's soul prototype in Chu Mu's spiritual world also vibrated, as if it was reminding Chu Mu that the person approaching him was a huge threat. Without any hesitation, he attacked with the moon's slaying sword. The dark, golden crescent moon instantly pierced through the sky. In the blink of an eye, it crossed a distance of tens of meters and slashed towards the rapidly approaching figure. This person had not expected that Chu Mu would take the initiative to attack. It was so straightforward that he could not dodge in time. Even blocking was very difficult, and he was immediately struck by the moon's slashing blade. If he had been struck by the beheading moon under normal circumstances, although he would have been injured, it would only be a minor injury. However, after being struck by Shan Yang and the others one after another, he was already heavily injured. With a boom, he was sent flying by the beheading moon. Blood splattered across the sky. In the next moment, a gray shadow flew out from the body and circled towards Chu Mu. In the blink of an eye, it entered Chu Mu's head. It was as if Chu Mu was frozen in place by a body immobilization technique. His 2 eyes stared straight ahead without blinking. His face was wooden like a puppet. The Azura sword of Gojoseon's soul avatar quickly appeared with an anxious expression on its face. It's actually a remnant soul. Now it's up to him. The gray shadow instantly appeared in Chu Mu's spiritual world. Kik, what a vast spiritual world. This body, I want it. The gray shadow condensed into a gray human head in Chu Mu's spiritual world. It was a little blurry, and one could barely make out its facial features. Immediately after, the head grew rapidly, and the body and limbs grew out, forming a complete human figure. It was a little blurry. The spiritual world was very important to a swordsman. The larger the spiritual world, the stronger the swordsman's spiritual energy and will. The benefits were very obvious. Sword soul. No, it's the embryonic form of the sword soul. The remnant soul exclaimed in disbelief. You actually have the embryonic form of the sword soul. That's great. That's great. As long as I get your body, I'll only need a few years to recover my previous strength. You're too happy. Chu Mu's voice sounded. A blurry figure slowly appeared in his spiritual world. Soul avatar? That's impossible. You haven't even reached the God condensation realm. How can you condense a soul avatar? The remnant soul was even more incredulous. The soul avatar was the symbol of the God condensation realm. With Chu Mu's current realm, of course, he couldn't condense a soul avatar. However, his soul was very strong, and his spiritual energy was also very strong. At this moment in his spiritual world, his powerful spiritual energy could barely condense into a form. If it was in the outside world, Chu Mu wouldn't be able to do it. Everything was due to the home field advantage. Even if your spiritual energy is strong enough to condense into a soul avatar, it's still not a real soul avatar. Let me destroy your spiritual energy avatar, shatter your soul, and take control of your body. The remnant soul laughed loudly, as if it had already completely controlled Chu Mu's body. You can try, Chu Mu said leisurely. This was his spiritual world, his home field. He had the advantage and was very confident. As he spoke, Chu Mu's spiritual avatar waved his hand. The sword soul prototype immediately flew up and turned into a small sword that fell into the hand of Chu Mu's spiritual avatar. Holding the sword, he stood in the spiritual world, and a sharp aura spread out. In the next breath, the illusionary profound sense and the ripping profound sense turned into two flood dragons that rushed toward Chu Mu. One of them circled around the small sword as if it had become one with the small sword, while the other circled around Chu Mu's spiritual avatar, making his spiritual avatar look faintly discernible. Two variant profound sense. You still keep surprising me. The remnant soul didn't seem to be worried at all. Instead, it seemed to be even happier. The more surprising part is yet to come. As soon as Chu Mu's voice fell, his spiritual avatar moved. It flashed like a cloud and appeared in front of the remnant soul, thrusting out his sword. Because this was the spiritual world, this sword didn't have the slightest bit of wind. It was a silent sword that was like a ghost's assassination, causing the remnant soul to be shocked. The remnant soul quickly retreated, condensing a gray sword in its hand and thrusting it out quickly. The remnant soul didn't have any profound sense or sword intent, but it was still a divine soul after all. It was more powerful than Chu Mu's spiritual avatar. Chu Mu had the sword soul prototype, the ripping profound sense, and the illusionary profound sense. With the combination of these three and his unpredictable sword arts, he immediately displayed an astonishing strength. With a few swoosh, 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 Chu Mu forced the remnant soul to continuously retreat and defend. It simply didn't have any chance to counterattack. The sword soul prototype flashed, and the illusionary profound sense was used. The remnant soul's vision blurred, and Chu Mu's sword disappeared. How can your sword arts? Before the remnant soul could finish its words, it was suddenly hit by Chu Mu's sword, causing a wisp of gray aura to dissipate. Like a sculpture, Chu Mu stabbed and slashed with his sword, displaying his sword arts to the fullest. The feeling of displaying sword arts in the spiritual world and in the outside world was completely different. There were almost no restrictions here, and it was very carefree, allowing Chu Mu to display 120% of the power of his sword arts. Wisps of gray aura floated out of the remnant soul's body and dissipated. The remnant soul became more and more blurred, and its power became weaker and weaker. Wait! The remnant soul roared in horror. He finally realized that with his current strength, it was impossible to defeat Chu Mu's spiritual avatar. On the contrary, it was more likely that his remnant soul would be defeated by his opponent. So he had to beg for mercy. If he was in his peak divine soul body, it would be easy to destroy his opponent's spiritual avatar. Chu Mu didn't pay attention to the remnant soul. He raised his sword and slashed down. The extremely sharp, ripping, profound sense immediately split the remnant soul in half, causing it to let out an extremely shrill cry. Stonequake was activated, and the remnant soul that was split in half immediately dissipated. In the state of his spiritual avatar, he couldn't use Mountain Quake at all. Otherwise, his spiritual avatar would collapse first. Fortunately, Stonequake was enough to deal with the remnant soul. After defeating the remnant soul, Chu Mu's spiritual avatar also dissipated, and everything returned to its original state. After regaining control of his body, Chu Mu saw the Shura sword of Gojoseon's spiritual avatar in front of him. What about the remnant soul? The Shura sword of Gojoseon looked at Chu Mu's eyes and knew that he was safe and sound. I defeated it, Chu Mu said. That's good. The Shura sword of Gojoseon nodded and returned to the dark red sword. Chu Mu walked forward with large strides. When he arrived in front of the corpse, he was immediately stunned. It was Sidu Feng. Although the corpse looked gray, Chu Mu definitely recognized that it was Sidu Feng. Maybe the remnant soul in the ancient sword tomb took over his body. The Shura sword of Gojoseon said, in the ancient sword tomb, there are very few remnant souls. It's just that they usually can't appear. There must be a special reason. Chu Mu nodded and checked Sidu Feng's corpse. He took a top-quality space bracelet from his wrist. Quick, take the ring on his finger. The Shura sword of Gojoseon's tone was very urgent. Ring. Chu Mu's gaze suddenly fell on one of Sidu Feng's fingers. There was a dark gold ring on it. It looked very ordinary, but Chu Mu still took it off. Senior sword of Gojoseon, this is? This dark gold ring looked like an iron ring. There were some faint lines crisscrossing on it. Looking at it carefully, it gave off a simple and mysterious feeling. This is a space ring. The Shura sword of Gojoseon's tone was still a little excited. Space rings are similar to space bracelets, but even the lowest level space ring is 100 times bigger than a top-quality space bracelet. It can also hold space bracelets and lower-level space rings. In addition, different space rings have different abilities. First, drip your blood on it and mark it with your soul. See how big this space ring is and what abilities it has. After Chu Mu recognized it, his soul entered the space ring to check. He was shocked by the space inside. 1,000 times it was 1,000 times bigger than a top-quality space bracelet. 1,000 times that's an intermediate space ring. The Shura sword of Gojoseon exclaimed. The one I used before was only a basic space ring. If you take this intermediate space ring to auction, it might be able to sell for tens of millions of king-grade spirit stones. Tens of millions of king-grade spirit stones. Chu Mu's face was full of shock. 1 king-grade spirit stone was equivalent to 10 top-quality spirit stones. Tens of millions of king-grade spirit stones were equivalent to hundreds of millions of top-quality spirit stones. If it was converted into upper-grade spirit stones, it would be 1 billion. 1 billion upper-grade spirit stones. Such wealth was at least several times or even 10 times more than the Heaven Burial Sword Sect. This made Chu Mu's heart beat several times faster. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 5:25. After calming himself down, Chu Mu covered the space ring with his mind. According to the method that the Shura sword of Gojoseon had told him, he could sense the ability of the space ring. Increase the speed of the sword by 10%. Chu tried to stab out with his right hand that was wearing the space ring. He found that under the effect of a strange power, it was much faster than before. 10%. For a swordsman like Chu who could draw his sword at an astonishing speed, the increase was very obvious. Then, 2 jade boxes appeared in Chu hands. They were the only things in the intermediate space ring. When the jade boxes were opened, a fragrant smell wafted out. Inside each of the 2 jade boxes was a round pill the size of a longan. One was purple and the other was silver. Whether it was the purple or silver pill, they were all very translucent. It was as if the outside was transparent, while the inside was the true purple and silver. It looked very deep and noble, and there were traces of unique fluctuations spreading out. When Chu looked carefully, he could see that there were countless mysterious patterns on the surface. It's actually the soul-cleansing mystery pill and the sword intent pill. The Shura sword of Gojoseon's voice went from low to high as he exclaimed again, "Senior, what are the soul-cleansing mystery pill and the sword intent pill?" Hearing the Shura sword of Gojoseon's exclamation, Chu immediately understood the extraordinariness of these 2 pills. The most important use of the soul-cleansing mystery pill is to make it easier for a swordsman to fuse different mysteries. It can also increase the degree of comprehension of the mysteries. Azura Sword King quickly said, "Aren't you working hard on how to fuse the fire and water mysteries? With this soul-cleansing mystery pill, you will definitely be able to fuse the fire and water mysteries in a short period of time. Moreover, with your comprehension, you will definitely be able to fuse the fire and water mysteries." As for the sword intent pill, you can tell from its name that it is related to sword intent. After consuming it, it can increase one's sword intent for a short period of time. The Azura sword of Gojoseon said, "I have to say, your luck is really too good. This remnant soul must have occupied Situ Feng's body and entered the 4th floor after you." Then he opened a king-level grave and obtained this intermediate spatial ring. These 2 pills should be in the spatial ring. When he obtained the spatial ring, he must have gone through a fierce battle. He was severely injured and attacked by you. He abandoned his body and planned to use his remnant soul to take over your body. Unexpectedly, you defeated him. In the end, everything belongs to you. The Azura sword of Gojoseon's analysis was pretty close to the truth. I'll keep these 2 pills first. After leaving the ancient sword tomb, I'll find a safe place to consume them. Chu heart burned with passion, feeling happy for the rapid increase in his strength. Someone's coming. The Azura sword of Gojoseon reminded him again. Chu quickly closed the jade box and put it into the spatial ring. The other spatial bracelets were also put into the spatial ring. At this time, the sound of wind breaking rang out as a figure rapidly approached. "So it's you." The newcomer was Sikong Jian. He saw Chu and the corpse at his feet and immediately understood. "Die!" Sikong Jian unsheathed his sword. A cyan sword light tore through the void and exploded, turning into a roaring hurricane. An incomparably terrifying sword intent was contained within it. The unparalleled sharpness made Chu feel like he was going to be minced into dust. The protective sword aura on his body was directly shattered. At least 70% sword intent. This Sikong Jian has the strength of a sword venerable. Chu heart shook. He quickly slashed out the beheading moon and used the inverse space step. He instantly appeared on the other side and slashed out another beheading moon. In the blink of an eye, the beheading moon was shattered by the hurricane. The hurricane roared as the other beheading moon slashed at Sikong Jian from the side. Not even 40% sword intent. Insignificant skill, and you dare to embarrass yourself in front of me. Sikong Jian said with disdain. He slashed out another beheading moon. The cyan sword light tore through the void, and the hurricane roared again. The beheading moon could only carry 39% sword intent. It was already fixed and could not be changed. However, Chu Mu had yet to create a sword skill that could carry more sword intent. As of now, the Beheading Moon was his most commonly used defensive sword skill. As for Beheading Metal and Killing Point, the requirements were higher. One needed to be close to the target and use them in close combat. Their power was several times stronger than the Beheading Moon. The Beheading Moon was shattered again. Chu Mu's figure seemed to be shuttling through the void. He used the Flying Swan Phantom Steps to the extreme. Together with the inverse space step, he avoided the hurricane's attack and appeared behind Sikong Jian. The eight-sided sky, desolate, sword stabbed out. The sword tip of the eight-sided sky, desolate sword instantly pierced through Sikong Jian's protective sword aura and touched his king-grade armor. Sikong Jian was shocked at first, then disdainful. Although this level of attack could break through his protective sword aura, it would definitely not be able to break through his king-grade armor and cause him the slightest damage. Just as Sikong Jian was about to slash back, Chu Mu's pupils shot out a strong light. Killing Point. The mountain-piercing energy instantly pierced through the king-grade armor and directly pierced into Sikong Jian's body. Sikong Jian only felt as if his body had been pierced by a sword. A tearing pain swept through his body, causing him to twitch all over. The sword that he was about to slash back suddenly stopped, and his face changed greatly. Chu Mu's sword changed from a stab to a slash. All of the power was gathered into the eight-sided, heavenly desolate swords. Not a single bit leaked out. Even the surrounding light felt like it was being absorbed. As a result, the space around the sword edge became a faintly discernible darkness. Beheading Metal. The Beheading Metal that contained the sword intent, tearing profound, and mountain-shaking energy. In terms of pure power, not only was it better than Beheading Moon, it was also better than Killing Point. Chu Mu believed that once Beheading Metal hit Sikong Jian, it would be enough to cut through his king-grade armor and then cut his body in half. His heart was beating wildly, and his hair was standing on end. A chill ran down his spine, and a strong sense of crisis rushed into his soul. Sikong Jian was almost scared out of his wits. Without caring about his elegance, he shouted loudly, "Open!" All of a sudden, a jade pendant hanging on Sikong Jian's neck emitted a strong light. In just a fraction of a second, it was even faster than Chu Mu's sword. The light covered his entire body and covered the king-grade armor, forming a layer of transparent light. With a cracking sound, Beheading Metal landed on the transparent light. The transparent light was instantly shattered, and Beheading Metal's power was also exhausted. It landed on the king-grade armor and was repelled by a force. Sikong Jian seized the opportunity and slashed at Chu Mu. Chu Mu took a step back and performed the inverse space step, appearing on the other side. Sikong Jian's sword missed, and then he slashed again. Beheading Moon attacked again. Insignificant skill, useless against me. Sikong Jian roared and shattered the Beheading Moon. After the Beheading Moon, there was a small sword light. It was like a falling star, and its horrifying aura instantly locked onto Sikong Jian. Sikong Jian's body froze, and he could not move. Sikong Jian's eyes were wide open, and his face was full of shock. His pupils were filled with disbelief and fear as he watched the star-like sword light shoot toward him. In just a moment, Sikong Jian's mind seemed to have stopped, and the meteor sword yuan pierced through his forehead, shattering his soul. The meteor sword yuan shrank again, and with a turn, it returned to Chu Mu's spiritual world. It had lost about 1/10 of its original power. In other words, for sword artists like Sikong Jian, the meteor sword yuan could kill 9 more before it dissipated completely. With a bang, Sikong Jian's body fell heavily on the ground, splashing up a lot of dust, intertwining with Situ Feng's body. Chu Mu acted quickly. He took away Sikong Jian's king-grade sword, armor, and spatial bracelet, and threw them into his intermediate spatial ring. He then performed the Flying Swan illusionary steps and inverse space step alternately, disregarding the consumption of his sword yuan and quickly left in another direction. Chu Mu and Sikong Jian's fight was very short, not even 10 breaths of time. Originally, Sikong Jian's strength was above Chu Mu's, and as long as he used it properly, he would be able to kill Chu Mu. However, he ultimately died under Chu Mu's meteor sword energy. After a few breaths of time, Chu Mu disappeared without a trace. After another 5 breaths of time, another figure quickly approached and appeared next to Sidu Feng and Sikong Jian's corpses. Looking down, his face was full of shock. This person was Xiangyang. After 3 breaths, Zhou Xian also quickly caught up and appeared beside Xiangyang. Just as he was about to speak, he suddenly saw the corpses under his feet. Looking closely, his pupils shrank, and he was so shocked that he could not make a sound. 2 corpses were lying on the ground. One of them looked like he had been dead for a long time. They did not know who he was, but they could vaguely recognize his face. It should be the person who had taken their sword skills and taken away the treasures in the tomb. The other one was Sikong Jian, who had fought against them together not long ago. Xiangyang and Zhou Xian suddenly felt a burst of cold air invading their bodies. It was a creepy feeling, as if it wanted to freeze their blood. Sikong Jian was lying on the ground, facing the sky. His pupils were white as he stared at the sky, as if he was questioning the heavens. In this kind of environment, that kind of gaze and silent questioning made one's hair stand on end, especially the wound on Sikong Jian's forehead. It was only the size of a toothpick, and it went all the way to the back of his head. Red and white liquid mixed together and flowed out. It was obvious that he had been killed in one strike. The other person was even stronger. He could fight against them together, and even slightly stronger. But now he had also died here. There were many wounds on his body, but none of them were fatal. It was impossible to tell the cause of death. Xiangyang and Zhou Xian were even more horrified. Originally, there were only 32 people who had entered the 4th level of the ancient sword tomb, and they were the 3 strongest. But suddenly there was an existence stronger than the 3 of them, which was out of their expectations. They did not expect that there would be an even more terrifying and mysterious existence. He did not kill Sikong Jian, but even the mysterious person who was stronger than the 3 of them together was killed, and everything was taken away. If they had arrived earlier than Sikong Jian, wouldn't they be the ones to die? At least a peak-level sword venerable expert. Zhou Xian's throat was dry, and he struggled to speak. "Go, leave this place immediately," Xiangyang said immediately. His face was pale and filled with fear. The 2 of them left in a panic. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 5:26. What a great harvest! Chu Mu almost laughed out loud. Whether it was Sidu Feng's or Sikong Jian's spatial bracelet, they both had a large number of treasures. Most of them were brought in by themselves, while the rest were obtained from opening the 4th level of the ancient sword tomb. Excluding Chu Mu's harvest, the 2 of them had obtained more than 10 treasures from the 4th level of the ancient sword tomb. Each of them was extremely valuable, but unfortunately they were all useless to Chu Mu. No matter what, Chu Mu's harvest from the 4th level of the ancient sword tomb was extremely huge. It allowed him to leave most of the Origin Realm swordsmen in the dust. Even the powerful sword venerable level swordsmen might not be able to compare to Chu Mu's wealth. Just a middle-grade spatial ring was enough to allow Chu Mu's wealth to surpass many sword venerables. Soon, the opening of the ancient sword tomb ended. Even though Chu Mu did not obtain anything else, what he obtained was already enough. Chu Mu's body was enveloped by a force that he could not resist. Even the Azura sword of Gojoseon could not do anything to it. All he could feel was a blur in front of his eyes as the world spun and time reversed. Both of his feet could not touch the ground. When he landed, all he could see was an endless expanse of yellow sand that covered the sky. It turned out that he had already left the ancient sword tomb and appeared in the fiery wind desert. Looking around, other than the endless yellow sand, there was no one else to be seen. After the ancient sword tomb closed, the swordsmen who were still alive would be sent out of the ancient sword tomb. However, when they were sent out of the ancient sword tomb, they would not be sent to a fixed location. In short, as long as they were in the fiery wind desert, they could be anywhere. If they were lucky, they would appear in the outer region of the fiery wind desert and be able to leave quickly. If they were unlucky, they would appear in the center of the fiery wind desert. It would be extremely difficult to leave. Chu Mu didn't know where he was in the wind-fire great desert. Sweeping his eyes over the place, he could only see boundless yellow sand rolling endlessly. The air was filled with an incomparably hot aura. It was as if there was an incomparably huge furnace hidden behind the yellow sand. The raging flames were constantly roasting. Suddenly, Chu Mu felt a trace of danger. He quickly used his footwork to move to the side, leaving behind an afterimage. In an instant, a terrifying torrent rushed out from under the yellow sand. With a bang, it directly shattered the afterimage and rushed up to 100 meters in the air, causing the surrounding temperature to increase by dozens of degrees. Shockingly, it was an earth fire. What a dangerous place! Chu Mu thought to himself. The power of the earth fire was too tyrannical. With his current strength, if he came into contact with it, even if he didn't die, he would be severely injured. With a thought, his body soared into the air, reaching a height of several hundred meters. He looked into the distance, intending to take a look, but all he saw was endless yellow sand. He couldn't see anything else at all. Looks like I can only rely on luck. Chu Mu had no choice. He randomly chose a direction and quickly flew. The wind and fire desert was indeed huge. However, if an Origin Realm swordsman wanted to, they could still cross it if they spent some time. Of course, the closer one was to the center, the more dangerous the wind and fire desert would be. Even an Origin Realm swordsman would have a high chance of dying. Therefore, unless there was a special need, an Origin Realm swordsman wouldn't cross the wind and fire desert. With a boom, Chu Mu stirred up a powerful storm and shot forward like a rocket. His body was like a stream of light, unbelievably fast. Without the suppression of the strange pressure from the ancient sword tomb, Chu Mu's speed was even faster than before, because his sword origin had truly reached the beginning of the Origin Realm. His flying speed had increased as well. Under the clear sky, a figure flew past at high speed, leaving behind a trail of dazzling smoke and fire. It was like thousands of fireworks had bloomed, quickly disappearing into the distance. After flying for about half a day, Chu Mu still couldn't see the end. With a glance, the desert was still covered in yellow sand, and it was extremely hot. Suddenly, he saw 3 small black dots on the ground. He was startled at first, but his intuition told him that he should go down and take a look. Perhaps he could find something. He quickly descended and saw 3 swordsmen fighting against a sand beast together. The 3 swordsmen didn't look very old, around 23 or 24 years old. There were 2 males and 1 female. The female was at the peak of the Qi High Realm, while the 2 males were at the peak of the Qi High Realm, Desheng. The sand beast they were fighting was at the peak of the Qi High Realm. In theory, the sand beast was weaker than them, but this was the wind-fire desert. The sand beast had the home field advantage, and with its immortal body, the battle was extremely intense. The sand beast couldn't kill the 3 of them, but the 3 of them couldn't really kill the sand beast either. The battle was extremely intense. Half of the sand beast's body was cut in half by the female swordsman's sword. Countless yellow sand exploded like bullets in all directions, forcing the 3 swordsmen to quickly dodge. The other half of the sand beast's body suddenly clawed at one of the male swordsmen. The male swordsman was in a hurry to deal with the sudden explosion of yellow sand, and had no time to dodge the claw. It seemed that the male swordsman was about to die under the sharp claw of the sand beast. The other two swordsmen also showed a look of despair. Chu Mu made his move. With a point of his finger, the air rippled and the sand beast's claw exploded. Immediately after, a sword pressure descended and directly suppressed the sand beast. The sand beast's body disintegrated, leaving only a sand core floating in the air, unable to reform the sand. A sand beast in the Chi-Hai realm was not Chu Mu's opponent at all. Luckily escaping with his life, the male swordsman was first astonished before becoming happy. The female swordsman quickly lifted her head to look at the sky and landed on Chu Mu. Once she saw that there was no sword aura on Chu Mu's back, but his wings were still floating in the air. Her expression changed, and she quickly gave a deep bow. Simultaneously, she used a respectful tone to say, "Many thanks to Senior for saving us. Otherwise, the three of us very likely would have died here. No need to be so polite." Chu Mu's figure landed, and he stood upright like a sword on the yellow sand. Sweeping his eyes over them, he found that the female swordsman's looks weren't bad, and the two male swordsmen were rather handsome. They didn't seem to be evil people. Which direction can we leave the wind-fire desert? Although she was surprised by Chu Mu's question, the female swordsman quickly answered, "Senior, if you keep going in this direction, you can leave the wind-fire desert and enter the Jinsha County." Jinsha County? Chu Mu nodded. He didn't expect it to be the Tianfeng County. However, Chu Mu didn't care. Although it was his first time hearing about the Jinsha County, and he had never been there before, as long as he was there, Chu Mu would have a way to get to the sky-connecting mountain. "Senior, we are from the Li family of the Jinsha County. If you have any orders in the Jinsha County, we are willing to do anything for you. We will do anything for you," the female swordsman quickly said. She knew that Chu Mu was at least an Origin Realm swordsman. Although he looked very young, his age shouldn't be too different from theirs. However, in this world, there was never a lack of geniuses. Even if there weren't many of them, there would always be some swordsman who could reach the Origin Realm before the age of 30. Their talents were far superior to ordinary people. Moreover, if they were able to reach the Origin Realm at a young age, they would be able to maintain their appearance for a longer period of time. In other words, the speed of aging would be greatly reduced by at least 10 times. This was also why some Origin Realm swordsmen who looked like they were in their 40s were actually more than 100 years old or even 200 or 300 years old. No matter what kind of situation Chu Mu was in their eyes, Chu Mu was a powerful existence that they couldn't reach. He was an existence that they had to look up to. Just this female swordsman's sword chi had reached the peak of the Chi-Hai realm. However, she was very clear that she only barely had the strength of a sword master. In terms of accumulation, she was far from enough. Even if she had accumulated enough, it would be extremely difficult for her to reach the Origin Realm. She might not even be able to reach the Origin Realm after a few decades. In her entire family, there wasn't a single Origin Realm swordsman. Therefore, to them and their family, the Origin Realm was a superior existence. If she could gain the favor of an Origin Realm swordsman, it would be a good thing for her family. The Li family? Chu Mu had a flash of inspiration. Has the Li family always been in the Jinsha region? Senior, as far as I know, the Li family was not originally in the Jinsha region. We only moved here about 20 years ago. Although the female swordsman didn't understand why Chu Mu would ask such a question, she still answered respectfully. Chu Mu's eyes lit up and asked again, "Do you know where the Li family was originally located?" "Senior, I only know that the Li family moved to the Jinsha region about 20 years ago. As for where we moved from, only the elders in the family know." The female swordsman answered carefully and quickly added, "If Senior wants to know more about the history of the Li family, you are welcome to be our guest. The Li family would be honored. Do you want to go back now?" Chu Mu thought for a moment and asked. He had been entrusted by the great Kuin Sword Mansion's mansion master, Li Daoyuan, to find the Li family and provide them with some help depending on the situation. However, he had never met them. Now, he had met these 3 swordsmen. Maybe they weren't, but maybe they were. Since it wouldn't take much time, Chu-Mu decided to go to the Li family in the Jinsha region to see if they were the real deal. Senior is willing to go to our Li family. The female swordsman and the 2 male swordsmen were immediately overjoyed. If you don't have anything else, you can go now. Chu-Mu smiled. Okay. What could be more important than Senior visiting our Li family? The female swordsman quickly said. She couldn't hide the smile on her face. She quickly turned around and spread out her sword chi wings, soaring into the sky. The other 2 male swordsmen also quickly spread out their sword chi wings. Although it would consume a lot of sword chi and would require elixirs to replenish, it was a great honor to be able to invite a primary realm swordsman to their home. It was worth it, very worth it. Chu-Mu also soared into the sky and followed behind the 3 swordsmen. They flew in the direction of the Jinsha region. In his heart, he hoped that this was the Li family that the great Kuin Sword Mansion's mansion master had mentioned. Otherwise, he wouldn't know where to look. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 5:27. Sir, please take a seat. The Li family master's face was full of joy as he gestured with his hand. Although he looked to be in his 40s, he still performed the greeting of a junior, showing great respect for Chu-Mu. Beside him were 4 other elders around 50 to 60 years old. Each of them had a face full of respect. Chu-Mu glanced at them and checked their cultivation. None of them were in the Origin realm, nor were they in the Chi-Hai realm. All of them were in the 9th transformation realm. There were a total of 5 of them. The family head, Li Mingxin, was at the 5th revolution of the 9th revolution realm. The other 4 elders were at the 5th and 6th revolution of the 9th revolution realm, respectively. Such a family could be considered a very powerful family in the Great Kuan dynasty. However, such a family was very weak in the central main sword region. The astral realm was a symbol. Any force without an astral realm swordsman would be considered a small force that couldn't even be mentioned in public. Not now. Let me ask you, where did the Li family move from? Chu-Mu asked directly as he stared at Li Mingxin. Any change in Li Mingxin's expression was within his grasp. Sir, our Li family was originally located in the Pingyang County of the Xiqing Prefecture. According to the family history, our Li family was once the #1 family in the Pingyang County. However, there were some unforeseen events that caused our family to decline. Li Mingxin thought for a while and didn't dare to hide anything. The reason why he called Chu-Mu sir instead of senior was because he could tell that Chu-Mu was definitely not over 30 years old. Origin realm swordsmen under 30 years old were usually geniuses with extraordinary backgrounds. Therefore, it was very appropriate to call him sir. As for hiding the origin of the Li family, there was actually no need to do so. The once powerful Li family had declined to its current state. There weren't any treasures in the family that were worth the attention of an Origin realm swordsman. Moreover, as long as one was willing, one could easily find out the origin of the Li family. Is there a person named Li Daoyuan in the family history of the Li family? Chu-Mu was overjoyed in his heart, but he didn't show it on his face. My lord actually knows. Li Mingxin and the 4 elders widened their eyes in disbelief. Sir, ancestor Li Daoyuan was the head of our Li family more than 100 years ago, Li Mingxin hurriedly said. That would be great. Chu-Mu nodded, making Li Mingxin and the 4 elders even more confused. However, Chu-Mu did not explain too much and only said, Senior Li Daoyuan is still alive, but he is not in the central sword region. This time, I was entrusted by him to look for the Li family, but to no avail. Unexpectedly, I met a descendant of the Li family by chance. Overall, it's not a big deal. However, I plan to stay in the Li family for a period of time. Convenient, of course it's convenient. Li Mingxin hurriedly said. The 4 elders were even more elated. Although they didn't know what Chu Mu's true cultivation level was, they were sure that he was at the origin realm. Even if it was only temporary, it was still an honor for the Li family that such a master was willing to stay with them. Moreover, this Sir's words were very clear. He knew ancestor Li Daoyuan more than 100 years ago and was entrusted by him to look for the Li family. There must be something that they didn't know. Sir, may I know where ancestor Li Daoyuan is now? Li Mingxin hurriedly asked in joy. Senior Li Daoyuan is temporarily unable to return due to some reasons. As for now, he is currently the mansion master of the Great Kuin Sword Mansion in the Eastern Sword region. Chu Mu thought for a moment and said, I will be staying with the Li family for a period of time. If there is anything that the Li family can't solve, you can tell me. I will deal with it at my discretion. You can also send a few talented disciples to my place. I will guide them in their cultivation based on the situation. When Li Daoyuan entrusted Chu Mu to help the Li family in a situation where his life wasn't in danger, Li Daoyuan's meteor sword energy had helped Chu Mu survive 2 life and death crises. Moreover, it had brought Chu Mu a great harvest. As a result, Chu Mu owed Li Daoyuan a great favor. Naturally, he couldn't just casually help the Li family. What he had said was only a part of the help. As for the rest, it would depend on the situation. Under the premise that there wouldn't be any obvious losses, Li Daoyuan would help as much as he could. Even the little help that Chu Mu had mentioned made Li Mingxin and the 4 elders overjoyed. Currently, the Li family was at the bottom of the list among all the forces in the Jinsha region. Naturally, they hoped to increase their strength in all aspects. If some of the disciples in the family received guidance from a primary realm swordsman, their strength would definitely increase greatly. Over time, the family's strength would increase. If someone was accepted as a disciple by this expert, it would be a joyous occasion for the Li family. Soon, Chu Mu's residence was arranged. It was the best and largest courtyard in the Li family. It was called the Mountain Courtyard. There was a fake mountain and pond in the courtyard. Beside the pond was a small pavilion. In addition, there were a few rooms. The environment was beautiful and very suitable for living. Li Mingxin even proposed to hold a grand banquet for Chu Mu, but was rejected by Chu Mu. These were all empty promises. Li Mingxin and the others didn't dare to disturb him too much. They said their goodbyes and left. Chu Mu sat in the pavilion and looked at the blue sky. During the conversation with Li Mingxin, he had fully understood the current strength of the Li family. The most powerful ones were the 9th Transformation Realm Swordsman, which was the Li family's patriarch, the 4 elders, and the Grand Elder. When the Li family first moved here, he began to break through to the 9th Transformation Realm and went into seclusion. It had been more than 20 years, and he still hadn't come out. In addition, there were 6 attendants. They were all at the 9th Transformation Realm, but the highest was only at the 3rd Transformation Realm. In the Li family, there were only a little more than 100 people. There were 11 9th Transformation Realm swordsmen. After that, there were 33 Qi High swordsmen. Most of the rest were at the Qi Refining Realm. There were a few who were still very young. They were either at the Sword Qi realm or had not started cultivating yet. Among the younger generation of the Li family, there were 3 people with the most talent. The first was the female swordsman who brought Chu Mu here, Li Kaitong. She was 24 years old and had reached the peak of the Qi High realm last year. The second was the male swordsman Li Kaitao. He was 25 years old and had reached the peak of the Qi High realm a year ago. The third was Li Mingxin's son Li Zhen. He was 18 years old and had reached the Qi High realm half a year ago. Chu Mu couldn't help but sigh. The Li family had really fallen. In a bedroom decorated in an ancient style, Chu Mu sat cross-legged on the bed, expelling all distracting thoughts. Then, Chu Mu took out a jade box from his space ring. He opened the jade box, and inside was a deep silver pill, the sword will pill. Chu Mu planned to use the sword will pill to refine his sword will and increase his sword will. After adjusting his chi to its peak, Yi Chun threw the sword pill into his mouth, and it melted instantly. He swallowed it and swallowed it. It went down his throat and into his stomach. It turned into a clear stream of medicinal power that rushed up and entered his mind. In a split second, Chumu entered a strange state. Other than the sword will, there was nothing else. This feeling was as if other than the sword will, everything else was isolated. In the whole world, there was only the sword will. In this state, Chumu's perception of the sword will increased tenfold. His understanding of the sword will also increased tenfold. Sword will, sword will. What is sword will? All kinds of realizations suddenly surged in his mind. Traces of sharpness gushed out from Chumu's body, cutting the surrounding air and making sizzling sounds. The strange thing was that the sharp sword will didn't leave his body. Instead, it wrapped around Chumu's body and flowed like a fish, as if it was protecting Chumu's body. Chumu's sword will increased again, starting from 45% before entering the ancient sword tomb. Chumu's sword was already at 45%. After that, he didn't have any time to cultivate and comprehend in the ancient sword tomb, so his sword will stopped at 45% and didn't increase at all. Now, under the effects of the sword will pill, Chumu's sword will had reached 46% in just 10 breaths, and it was still increasing. 47%, 48%. The increase in sword will became more difficult the further one progressed. It often required more time. To be a true swordsman, it was impossible to not have sword will. Just sword will alone wasn't enough. One had to have enough cultivation and at least one ultimacy. A sword skill was only a complete sword skill after fusing the mysteries of sword origin and sword intent. Only then could the true power of the sword skill be unleashed to the fullest. As a result, whether it was cultivation, sword intent, or mysteries, they all required time to cultivate and comprehend. Just one couldn't make a swordsman truly powerful. They needed to advance together. That was the way of the king. As a result, every increase in sword intent required a longer period of time and a higher degree of difficulty. This was because the swordsman had to be distracted. Now, because of the sword will pill, Chumu's sword will had increased by leaps and bounds. Increase, increase, and increase. Soon, in just 60 breaths, Chumu's sword will had increased from 45% to 50%, and it had reached the peak of 50%. It was just a little bit away from 51%. At this time, the sword will pill's effects were exhausted. Chumu only felt that the feeling of being isolated to the point where only sword was left had disappeared, and he had returned to his original state. In the sword soul prototype in his spiritual world, the sword that was flowing became more solid, causing the sword soul prototype to look more solid. It's a pity that there's only one sword will pill. If there were a few more, I might be able to increase my sword will to 70% and directly have the qualifications to challenge a sword venerable and become a sword venerable, Chumu thought to himself. However, I only need 10 days to half a month to comprehend a sword intent that is close to 51%. Then I will be able to reach 51%, and its power will be even greater. With the support of the embryonic form of the sword soul, my current 50% sword intent will be comparable to a normal 60% sword intent. After I consume the soul-clearing profound pill, I will be able to fuse the water profound with the fire profound and create a new sword move. At that time, its power will be extremely shocking. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation.